Okay, we've just gone live on YouTube. I need to get a beer in my glass, don't I?
Yes, you do.
I think I'm going to do this one.
Oh, no mole grips this time.
It's not from Timmy.
I opened one of Timmy's beers last night, and he is a strong man, isn't he?
That's one way of saying it.
He's
Tricky, we
fucking
can't hear you, mate. You're muted.
Still can't hear you, mate.
It might be that you haven't selected the right mic on OBS in the settings. It's your audio source. Is it the right one?
Well, shit, that's a weird beer.
What is it?
You'll find out in a minute. Fucking cock tease you all night with that one, mate.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Yeah, we got you. We've got you.
That's weird. It was working before, it just shattered. Crazy.
Yeah, it's a bit low though, mate. You might want to turn that shit up.
It might be because I loaded up the software for recording.
Oh, Audacity.
Logic.
No, Tricky uses Logic. He's on a SPAC, isn't he?
But no, you can. Obviously, I'm on the Mac, and it's
Yeah, I could still use that, but
he's a Vulcan. He just uses Logic.
Hang on, just let me get comfy because chances are pretty good I'm going to fall asleep about an hour into this one, boys. Oh, actually, hang on.
Well, that will make it a much shorter podcast without all the science bollocks. So,
slam dunk. Oh, you're upsetting him now, look. Oh, look, he's got his Hop Edition t-shirt on.
Oh,
in the house.
That looks good.
Nice.
There it is.
That does look good.
That looks sick.
Is that a hoodie or just a normal sweater?
No, hoodie. Oh no, well.
What was that?
Was that the hoodie?
Yeah.
As well, you had there, yeah.
Get my tat suit. Tatties.
Baby back ribs.
Oh, hello. Actually, I've got fucking proper bullets on at the minute. Right.
Oh dear.
Tic-tac smuggling.
Are we ready, gentlemen? 5, 4.
Oh.
Right. You know what? I'm just going to go from 3 because you'll get confused, don't you?
You do, yeah.
None of y'all can count higher than 3. We good to go?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, click. Okay. Oh shit! I've got a hell of a lot of noise coming through on my recording. Let me turn that down just a smidge. How's that? Is that a bit better? Is that okay? Bit quiet,
Yeah,
a bit loud.
Yeah,
which
sounds
is
okay
good.
to me.
Right, that's fine then. Tricky's the one. Tricky knows this shit. So, right, fucking stay there, you bleeding microphone. Don't drop. Don't.
Nah.
That's a good start, isn't it?
Are we on YouTube?
Yeah, we're live on YouTube.
Excellent,
I don't think
excellent.
We've got 3 people currently watching.
Glad
as well.
other people will have the chance to see that.
I was gonna
Yeah, it's highly enjoyable. He's get Brewer's drip.
6 people watching now.
Pretty early on.
So
be suffering from that issue.
Sort it out, Chris.
Mate, I don't suffer from Brewer's droop. I've already told you this.
You've got the blue pills in the
What's
side
going
door.
Oh, hang on. Wait there.
He cuts the middleman out.
Guys, cancel your Audacity because mine's cut off.
Right.
Fuck's sake.
I was going to say he cuts out the middleman and just puts it straight in his beer.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay, let's try that one again. For the cheap seats. 3, 2, 1, click. And now mine's not working. Audacity's crashed on me.
Yes, it's because you've got a piece of it.
Should have
Because
got
I'm
a
what?
Mac.
Well, to be fair, I am thinking about buying a mini Mac or a Mac Mini or whatever you call them.
Do it.
I'd
So-
be fucked if I'm getting the M1 chip, though.
Well, that's what it is.
Not all of them.
No, but them one's the best.
You talk about this chip like it's the second coming of the fucking Messiah, mate.
Right, so we're gonna have to go again with Audacity.
We're going to have to go again.
Sorry,
I'm
folks
sorry.
on YouTube. This is the background of what actually happens on the podcast.
Yeah, you're just
behind the
watching all the
scenes.
shit live.
This is it.
Behind the scenes.
Absolute amateurs here.
It's a slick. It's just,
Are we ready to rock and roll?
Should we talk
Okay.
about gravy first?
No. Okay, unless you've made it and found out that it's awesome. Right then. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, I've actually got some recording. I've got some blips on the thing. We look to be good to go. Is everybody else good?
Yeah, all good.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
2 seconds silence and then Tricky hits it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So we're back again with another episode of the Hop Edition, and we've got the full pack back in the house this time. So the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have been reunited for this episode, which today is going to be focusing on reducing oxygen in the brewing process. So it's a pretty important one, this, if you want to avoid oxidation issues, particularly with the hoppy, hazy beers that everyone seems to be brewing these days. So sit tight. There's quite a lot of stuff to go through, but should be quite a few interesting things covered on this one. Okay,
Nice.
cool. So let's get this one started up with the usual what we're drinking. So let's go to Chris. What are you
I
drinking?
thought you might come to me first. So I got some beer mails during this week. I got a beer mail from Derek Hodge, which is just amazing. But they're in the house. They're going to be telly beers. And I got some from Nuthatch Brewery, which I do believe is Mr. Luke
No, it's
Stevens.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And the beers that I got from Luke are a Mandarina IPA at 4.5 ABV. And I got an IPL IHL, which is absolutely, I mean, look how
That's clarity.
crystal clear. So I'm having that one later, Luke. Really, really, really nice beer. Very, very nice. The Mandarina IPA. Clearly, it's got a load of Mandarina Bavaria in it. You get a really weird nose off this beer. It's kind of, it's fruity, but not completely in your face fruity. And it's very, very mandarin, tangerine, kind of satsuma-y type orange. I don't know how much you put in, but it was just enough. And I thought I'd put it in my new posh crappy glass. There you go. I got one of the little vocation. Yeah. That's the level that we're at right now. But I have to say, really, really nice beer. Superb. Carbonation's bang on for me. Head didn't stick around very long, but I think I poured it wrong, to be fair. Flavors absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. You don't get a lot of the malt, but I am getting, quite a lot of the hops in this one. So I'm really, really impressed. Good job, Luke. Good job.
Nice.
It tastes absolutely lovely. And I will nominate Andy.
Sweet. Okay, so I'll just put mine. I have got my Time for Lime, which is the follow-on from the Need for Citra beer that is now currently sitting up on YouTube. So this is the next one following on. I quite like to do a series of different beers so you can see what a difference kind of things are. So this one it's kind of like the Vacant, but it's boosted the white wheat up to 1 kilo, and then it's also now introducing flake torrefied oats. So it's try to see what the oats bring as well, because oats has been one of those funny things where I've always been quite a bit scared of because of what we're going to talk about tonight. It's very susceptible to oxygen. So it, as you can see, I don't know obviously listeners on the podcast won't be able to see, but it is not oxidized, which is really, really good. It's a nice pale colour, and it's got Citra and Motueka in it. So I wanted to try and get that lime flavour, which has got a nice kind of underline, because it's not like punch in the face lime, because Motueka, I think, as a hop is quite it. You need to use a lot of it to get the flavour through. So it's got Citra, Motueka, and it's quite tropical juice. It's got Sanders yeast in it as well, and I'm not getting the kind of mad rubbery thing I got in one of the earlier ones at the initial, because sometimes with the yeast, when it takes time to drop out, you get it's almost like a kind of rubbery taste from the yeast. But this one's not too. This one hasn't had that, to be fair. Like, and I think it's because the temperature wasn't pushed up too much at the early when it was fermenting. Keep it at kind of 19, and it's quite happy. So, yeah, really, really nice. It's conditioning up quite well, so it's good.
What's the ABV on it, Andy?
Oh, you're asking. It's 4.5.
Yeah, nice.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Motueka. I've discovered Motueka recently. It's a lovely, lovely hop.
Yeah.
Need to plan a few more brews with it.
Can you tell us what you're drinking then, Owen?
So I was also lucky enough to receive quite a bit of beer mail this week. Yes. I was having a conversation with my wife about how often beer arrives to the house. Not sure if anyone else has had a similar sort of conversation.
Yeah, you do have to convince them that you're not actually paying money for all of it, don't you? Like...
Yeah, and it was like, she was saying that I get a delivery like every other day, and I was like, nah, no way. Like, I haven't had any beer mail for quite a while. I probably only get maybe 2 or 3 commercial beer deliveries, maybe only 2 a month, I reckon.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make this case, and then literally this week I've had beer mail from about 4 or 5 people, and just absolutely blown me out of the water. So thanks to everyone that sent me beer mail, but you've also stitched me right up. So thanks. But I've actually I was lucky enough to get some beer from Derek Hodge, so I'm drinking his Vacant Gesture, which is called Van Can't Gesture, but the driver can. With lots of middle fingers, so which is pretty gold. The beer is fairly hazy at the moment. On the nose, I'm not getting a massive amount on the nose.
Because is it not done with Citra?
More. Probably, yeah. So this is an all Citra, 3.5, 3.6% vacant. I'm probably getting more malt on the nose.
Okay.
Not a massive amount of Citra. And on the flavour, I'm getting a kind of Parma Violet thing.
Interesting.
I will add, though, I do have a cold right now, so my palate might just be all over the place. It's probably the reason I can't smell anything.
I actually brought a bottle of that out tonight as well, so I will investigate your Parma Violet claims.
Yeah, see what you think. You might just go, no, mate, straight Citra. I don't know what you're on about.
Citrus juice.
And then we're all concerned that Owen's got COVID.
Yeah, I don't think I have, but you never know. Good, reasonably assertive level of bitterness in it. Body's really good. Pretty clean, I think, in terms of fermentation. Just not as much of the typical Citra flavor profile as what I was probably expecting, but it's not unpleasant. It is a nice beer. I'm just picking up some weird flavors. So as I say, it might be me, but see what you think, Tricky, when you crack it.
Yeah, I'll get onto that one eventually. But first, I've got the Cheeseburger Cavalry, or I've renamed this one the Cheeseburger Deluxe because it's my interpretation of the recipe, which I did fiddle around with a little bit. So it's 6.6% IPA, and it's mainly Citra and Mosaic, but I did add in some extra Columbus and Equinox sort of late in the boil for this one as well, and in the hop stand. So yeah, just to, because I mean everything's Citra and Mosaic these days, so I thought I'd just add a couple of extra bits in there just to jazz it up a little bit.
Yeah, you've done that.
Yeah, slightly tweaked the grain bill as well. So I upped the oats a little bit to about 9% and put in a bit of honey malt instead of whatever form of crystal there was on the original recipe. And it's come out
cool.
very nicely, to be fair. Really nice, sort of soft, kind of juicy fruit flavors on it. It's got that classic sweaty mangoes kind of mosaic thing on the aroma. Nice. And some other kind of soft fruit stuff going on. And it's drinking really nicely as well. So there's a little bit of bitterness to it, but it's pretty restrained bitterness. So it's, drinking like I guess it does drink kind of like a Nipah, but somewhere between a, Nipah and a slightly more traditional American IPA, because it's not quite as low on the bitterness as a lot of New England's would be. And there are some hops in the boil as well, whereas, most of the Nipahs that you're getting these days would be all whirlpool and dry hop. So there is a little bit of that bitterness coming through from the sort of Columbus and stuff earlier in the boil, but I kind of like that. I'm been kind of veering a bit more towards the kind of West Coast beers and IPAs and stuff like that in the last few weeks since I did the brew for the Free Hills competition, which they're judging today apparently. So fingers crossed for that. But anyway, so yeah, I'm kind of liking an IPA to have a little bit of a bite to it, but this one is still really soft in terms of like the sort of flavor profile and the bitterness, but it just does have a little bit of an IPA kick to it, which is nice. But yeah, lots of mango-y, kind of lychee, juicy, sort of peachy, apricot, mango stuff going on with the flavor. It's really nice and dangerously drinkable for sort of nearly a 7% beer. So
nice.
I think you'll be swearing in half an hour.
Yeah.
That's the plan. Saturday night, guys. On the bevies.
On the bevies.
When I brewed that quite a long time ago, I found the same thing tricky. I think it's more kind of sort of east-west kind of mid-coast, if you want to call it that. I don't know. There's different terminologies in there for that sort of thing. But I actually got a lot more grapefruit out of mine. Mm-hmm. But then admittedly, I think you changed up the recipe quite a bit, right?
Yeah. So the Equinaut and the Columbus have definitely steered it in a slightly different direction flavor-wise, although it is mainly the Citra and Mosaic. But yeah, I did go for a more kind of West Coast sort of water profile on this one as well, which is was interesting to see the sort of difference that it made. So it's definitely more sulfate-led rather than chloride. I was expecting that maybe to make it a bit more kind of dry and bitter than it has turned out, but I think because the Bugu ratio is fairly low on this anyway, it still has a fairly soft kind of bitterness to it, and but maybe just a little bit lighter in terms of sort of mouthfeel and body and stuff like that because of the higher sulfate, perhaps. I don't know. It would be interesting to brew this one and do it with a high chloride, water profile and see whether that pushes it more into the kind of Nipah territory and vice versa. But yeah, I agree, Owen. It's definitely somewhere sort of in between the two there, really. It's sort of, mid coast.
sounds like a tasty beer, Tricky. I'd quite like to try it.
Oh, you might be angling for some beer mail.
What? No, I never.
This is how he gets so much beer mail, is because he keeps hustling for it.
But if you fancied sending me some, then I'd gratefully receive it.
There's a big list of beer mail due, so I'm sure some of it will find its way to you fine gentlemen at some point.
There you go.
If I
Can somebody tell me who Brewcat Brewery is? I've no idea who that is.
It's somebody who's on the chat.
No shit. Thanks for that one. Fucking hell, Sherlock. Top job there. Mate. No, I've no idea. Yeah.
It's not Daft Cat, is it?
Who's that?
No,
I don't think so.
Your pal?
I don't know. Whoever it is. Right. So come on, let's get on this. Let's crack on with oxygen in brewing. So why do we reduce oxygen? Well, we reduce oxygen because of oxidation. which is the addition of oxygen to compounds within the beer. And as a general rule, oxidation of beer, I think we can all agree, is a bad thing, right?
Yes.
Definitely.
Thanks for backing me up there, boys. Yeah.
Force for thought.
Satellite display, satellite transfer. It's
I
all
concur.
working good.
It turns the beer into jam. I
was trying to decide. It was a toss up for me.
Owen's the one who, when he's finished a super hoppy Nipah, he actually purges it with pure oxygen before he kegs it.
Just for extra brownness.
Yeah.
So it's all about ripe.
All about the purple beers. So it basically, the oxidation is bad. Cardboard, jammy, dark, dingy, horrible looking beers. Generally just a bit crap. And because of this, and because of the extra focus that there currently is on oxidized beers, mainly because of the Nipah, the super hopped pale ales, and just the fact that, we've got all these mega hoppy beers with all of these ridiculous adjuncts in, like, oats and wheat and white wheat and, all of this other stuff. That makes them really, really, really susceptible to oxygen. And it means that you will notice it very, very much if there is oxygenation within that beer. You agree?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Okay, somebody else keep going, because I'm sick of hearing the sound of my own voice today. All I've done is shout to Oscar to shut up.
Just batter on, mate.
Here's an interesting point. We mentioned about some of the off flavors, right? But increased bitterness. Do you associate that with
I would
oxygen?
definitely say so, yeah.
Unexpectedly bitter beers.
I mean, I think it depends on the extent to which the beer's oxidized, because, I've been unfortunate enough to try some beers. It's usually sort of, beer males that have gone a bit wrong, where you get to see the really badly oxidized beers. And I have had a couple where it's like obviously the color is usually the first indicator. When you see the color is completely,
brown,
dishwater brown, basically. But then on the flavor, for me, with those ones that have really gone bad, it's like the bitterness is just like intense and quite sharp and unpleasant, very astringent bitterness kind of thing.
And there's some science to that, right? In terms of the alpha acids kind of oxidizing and
I'm
then
just gonna smile and nod.
Yeah, I'm I was teeing up Chris there. He's not taking the bait, but it's fine.
He's left you dangling.
I'll be honest.
There is some science which I can't quote.
Which science are we talking about?
In terms of oxidation of alpha acids.
Well, oxidation of alpha acids does, or it can, lead to an increased perceptibility, putting it bluntly. So whereas normally this is what I've read, okay, and it was an article that was written on a website, so I'm going to by no means give this full peer-reviewed clarity, but what I read was oxygenation of alpha acids can actually lead to increased perceptibility of the bitterness converted of the isomerized form, basically. So if it oxygenates, once it's isomerized, if it oxidizes, I'm fucking making words up here. If it oxidizes after it's isomerized, then you get an increased perception of that bitterness. That's as I understand it, but I've not done any reading on this because I've been building a trampoline.
Fair enough.
Fair dues.
For 3 days.
Excellent.
So he's still trying.
No, it's all done.
Are we going to get onto Hook's Law in a minute?
We are going to get onto Hook's Law in a minute.
Let's not go into Hook's Law.
Brilliant. I think there is some stuff in Scott Yanish's book that I recall reading, but I'm not feeling great and I'm struggling to recall much of it. But what was the other thing? I guess you mentioned about hazy beers, particularly those with certain malts in them, will tend to be quite distinguishable when oxidized. But actually, it's like if you tend to have like a clear beer, then it's not so much of a visual appearance, right? Sometimes it's darker, but it's actually more of a flavor association that you end up having to kind of make to oxidation. I think it becomes a little, maybe sometimes harder to pinpoint, but
flavor and aroma definitely. But
yeah.
I mean, I think we sort of talk about hazy beers as obviously being the ones where you see it a lot more obviously, but we should probably say this is something that you want to avoid in pretty much all beers really, because oxygen is essentially a staling agent. So your beer is
it has only just
becoming
become
stale and losing flavor and quality. Whatever style of beer it is, it may be slightly less noticeable with certain styles of beer, or maybe slightly less problematic, but the process in terms of trying to avoid oxygen, I think is probably something you should try and apply for whatever you're brewing, whether it be a hazy IPA or a more traditional bitter or something like that.
Yeah. So you see your perceptibility on identification of oxidation, because it's important we talk about this, right? Because if we've got people that are tuning in for 2 or 3 hours to listen to how to reduce oxidation, it's pretty important that they actually understand how to identify if they have it in their beers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the first is we talked a bit about visual perception that you might get. I guess the next is like an aroma. So I guess a telltale sign for me is if it's a hoppy style of beer and it lacks aroma, you would expect to be associated with that style of beer, or you expect it like, oh, it sounds like hoppy beer, and you pour it and it doesn't smell really at all of good fresh
I think
hops.
when you've lost those hops sort of straight away on the nose, that's definitely a telltale sign, isn't it?
Yeah, and it will
normally follow through to the flavor afterwards.
Yeah, is there any other smells that you would associate with an oxidized beer?
I've always found when you have a beer, I mean, I had a couple of beers back in the early days that definitely were oxidized. I've found bottles of them since, and they were definitely oxidized. And the one thing that I always found was they smell sweet.
Yeah.
They smell, for want of a better word, jammy. They really do. And if you end up with these jammy beers, if you end up with that, it's really difficult to describe because it's something that you'll only know if you've smelt it. If your beer smells sweet, you've got problems. I think it's that simple, really. There are very few beers that actually smell sweet, that when they do smell sweet, you know that you've got real issues.
I think it's that particular sort of cloying kind of, like you say, jammy kind of sweetness. You can recognize that quite easily versus a kind of malt kind of sweetness that smells
clean
fresh.
sweetness.
So it's almost a sugary sweetness as opposed to a malty sweetness.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably the better way to describe it.
Yeah.
But it is definitely problematic, and it is one of those things that you will pick up on your senses. You'll pick it up on your nose, you'll pick it up on your tongue, and to be fair, you'll pick it up with your eyes. The only thing you're not going to do is hear it, really.
But it has been a kind of, it's something that we've worried about more often now. So because we've moved into the hazy scene, and it definitely seems like, the whole just using a plastic bucket to do NEPAs just isn't the way to go sort of thing, because it is more, these type of styles are more susceptible to oxidation through, because of, I think one of those that we were talking about was oats is one of the kind of prime suspects, because of the manganese, or is it, that's in it, can pick up and turn brown a lot easier. Whereas, 5 years ago, were we that worried about oxygen in our beers, or dump it, opening up the lid and chucking in a load of hops, and now we've got flipping all sorts going on.
Well, I suspect people probably were, and I agree with your point about the fact that the NEPA style which arguably has been around in the US probably longer than it has in the UK. Took some time to come over the Atlantic, I guess.
Mhm.
But I think your point around the development in terms of the homebrew technology that focuses on the reduction of oxygen, which we'll get onto later in a bit more detail, has been, I think, probably one of the biggest markets in terms of kind of homebrew, I would
Definitely.
argue.
Would you
Gadgets.
guys agree with me? Would you guys agree with me that it's definitely been a driver as far as closed transfers go?
Yeah.
It's definitely been a driver as far as pressurized fermentation goes.
Yep.
It's definitely been a driver as far as new yeast strains go.
Yep.
And I think it's also been a driver in letting people know oxygen's really bad in your brewing. And I think that's what you guys just touched upon. You know, it's weird how sometimes when you follow an avenue and then people take it to the nth degree, when you get that, you pick up all kinds of effects on the fringes. And those are the effects that either make your brewing change or make your brewing better because of the change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly in terms of like where homebrewing has moved forward, certainly in the time that I've been doing it, that seems to be the area that has, advanced the most, I guess, in terms of the availability of these technologies, and especially when it comes to things like Firmzillas and stuff like that, where it's made it affordable now for pretty much anyone to be able to do pressure transfers and fully closed sort of pressurized fermentations, all the rest of it. That's, I think, within the sort of fairly short amount of time that I've been brewing, it's gone from that not really being talked about or available at all to it being like everybody's talking about doing this.
Tricky. I'm getting flashbacks, mate, of you using storage chests stacked on top of each other, so you could get the maximum amount of brews going at the one time.
There was a point where I was going for maximum volume as opposed to maybe maximum quality. I guess.
Quantity.
That was amazing. I was just like, this guy's just rocking it.
But I mean, we'll come onto this in more detail, I think, as we go through the podcast. But obviously not having a properly sort of sealed fermenter does make it harder to exclude oxygen fully through the process. However, as long as you treat the beer very carefully through all of your transfers and everything like that, and you're not opening the things up, to air fully, you can still, I mean, I did brew Neepers in those boxes and they didn't turn brown straight away. I don't think they
straight away.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily had the no. To be fair, I don't think it ever went proper murky brown or anything. The color maybe wasn't quite as bright as it could have been, and the hop flavor I would say didn't necessarily last quite as well as it could have done. But I guess the point I'm making is obviously it makes it easier to exclude the oxygen with that sort of equipment, but or not in the case of using boxes and stuff like that, which are essentially sort of partially open fermentation. If you're careful, you can still use quite basic equipment and manage the amount of oxygen exposure you get, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. But there's much more stuff out there now that makes it possible to do it properly closed and basically keep your beer completely away from exposure to air and oxygen really until it's in the glass, I suppose, pretty much.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Right. So a couple of things that we need to and interestingly, somebody's just thrown literally this question into the chat. So we kind of need to talk about hot and cold side oxygenation or aeration and what those meanings are and where we're sort of looking at in terms of this podcast. So hot side is essentially everything during your brewing process where the wort is still hot, i.e. before you've cooled it down to kind of pitching temperature. Cold side is essentially everything after that. And the question in terms of hot side oxygenation and aeration and so on is related to LODO brewing, which some of you may have heard of, which is low dissolved oxygen brewing. That has come about through kind of German, I'm not sure whether it's professional German breweries or the sort of more kind of homebrew scene in Germany, but It's definitely come out of kind of German brewing primarily, I think, where they will try and avoid dissolved oxygen through the whole brewing process, hot and cold side. In terms of this episode, we're going to focus mainly on cold side oxygenation, because certainly in terms of, you know, everyone's experience on this podcast, that's the point at which we're worrying about oxygen. And to be honest, I don't have any experience of trying to avoid hot side aeration other than just not doing anything mental, like, you know, I don't know, blasting it with a whisk on the end of a drill while it's boiling or something strange like that. So Chris, I think wants to say something about that.
I think what we've got is, I saw a few videos by Dr. Hans where he was talking about low-dose brewing, and I did a little bit of research because I said I would on one of the episodes. And basically what I came to is, essentially all they do is they underlet, as opposed to pouring water onto their grain. They kind of underlet underneath the grain. They give it a mix. They try and avoid splashing at all costs. Anything which is going to ripple the surface and increase cause an increased dissolution of oxygen within their beer, they're kind of avoiding that. And I think that don't they even recommend like not going like a figure of spoil? They recommend more of a sort of gentle simmer. To be fair, that one, if that's what they are recommending, and I've not read that myself, that's utter bollocks. Because
you would want it the other way around, if anything, wouldn't you?
You'd want a more vigorous boil, because it drives
gas out of the liquid.
It drives dissolved gases out.
Hmm.
I think if that's something they are recommending, then there's got to be some science behind it. But I can't see
pseudoscience.
Yeah, or pseudoscience. Yeah, bit like your Werry kits. You've just got to try to avoid splashing at all costs. Galahad, which is Chris Harrison, isn't it? Chris Harrison Hawks. Some guys pre-boil the mash water and then cool it again before adding grain. Yeah, I can see how that would get rid of the oxygen, but to be fair, all you're doing is reducing the amount of oxygen which your yeast are going to have. And having seen Dr. Hans with his underletting, tiny, gentle stirring, sparging from a really low height so as not to drip, and then blasting his wort with pure oxygen just before he pitches his yeast, kind of thinking, what's the point? But I mean, that oxidation is going to occur all the way through the process. So if it's never been an issue for you right up until now, then I don't see how it's going to be an issue going forward. Especially
one thing that confuses me with that whole hot side aeration thing, obviously, as you said, Chris, like the boil is going to drive off your dissolved gases anyway. We're talking about a very, very short, relatively period between, you know, sort of mash and then boiling it off and probably driving off most of that gas, right? And you know, how quick is the potential like oxidation of stuff within that mash going to happen anyway? Because, like, you know, when we're talking about cold side aeration and oxidation, it's not going to be like instantaneous, is it? Like, you're not going to, you know, your NEPA's not going to change color like that straight away. So
it is quick.
Yeah,
oxidation is a quick process. If you understand the chemistry of oxidation, you'll know how quick it is.
Yeah.
But is it going to be quick with that much matter? With that much solid matter? Is it going to be quick with that much temperature involved? I mean, the temperature is going to reduce the oxygen. The oxygen is going to naturally heat up and escape through the top anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is one of those situations whereby you'd have to really sit down, design a test, run through that test, and, you know, it's going to end up with people purging the headspace of their mash tun with CO2 and shit like that, isn't it? And that's just a whole level of anal that I don't want.
No thanks.
Yeah, I'm just reading up on the sort of, there's a paper that's been published, and I think like they're making an argument that lots of experiments have been done, but they're fundamentally flawed because everything has kind of been tainted with oxygen before they've started the experiment.
I mean, what do you do about the oxygen that's
No,
involved in the what's it called? What do you do to grain? You know, malting process.
Yeah.
What do you do about the oxygen involved in that?
There must be oxygen like in the malt. In addition to the fact that you have to mill it, which of course is going to be adding, I would imagine, a fair bit of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
yeah.
I guess
I'm not
just to
convinced.
sum it up, I think based on the fact that pretty much all commercial breweries are probably brewing without any real concern for hot side aeration and oxidation anyway. And
I wouldn't say that. There's a lot of them that underlet. There are a lot of them that underlet.
Yeah, but I mean that's maybe just more the actual like logistics of getting that much water into the ton. It's probably easier to do that through the the tap on the bottom than it is chucking it in on the top. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily a consideration for hot side aeration, but I guess what I'm saying is it's not something that you generally hear. If you're looking at like breweries tips on brewing, like hazy beers and all this kind of stuff, none of them are saying, "Oh, be really careful to limit your hot side, aeration or anything like that." It's always about cold side and all this kind of stuff. So, maybe for certain beers, there's a place for it, but again, based on the fact that the vast majority of homebrewers don't do anything in particular to try and avoid it, it's it can't really be that big an issue. Or if it is, it's going to be a very marginal gain, isn't it? Versus a fairly significant gain compared to, let's say, doing a closed transfer versus just splashing it in from 5 foot up in the air straight into the the keg or whatever it is that you're putting it into. Do you know what I mean? Like that's going to be instantly you've fucked your beer versus you've got something that's really nice and drinkable. Whereas hot side aeration, I think, is maybe going to be, if anything, a very slight improvement. I would hazard a guess at, having no actual experimental experience of it.
So it's probably one of those things to like be aware of, but maybe don't disappear down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But one point I was going to make is the oxygen thing is tough because it's that enemy that you can't see, right? It's an invisible enemy. And what I do find is you can make like the best beer in the world from through the brewing process, through the fermentation, and then you get a bit of oxygen into your packaging and it wrecks your beer. It's that's why you have to be so disciplined and have your process so nailed at every stage. It's one of those, like, you can't see it, and it can so often happen even after you've made an absolutely stellar beer.
A silent killer.
It is
the hazy IPA, yeah.
It is.
It's like rabbits, isn't it? It's like a rabbit. You can drive 150 miles, and as soon as you hit that country road, there's going to be one little bunny jump up in front of your car. Happens to me all the number of rabbits I've killed on country roads must number in the hundreds. It's ridiculous. They're like rabbits. Oxygen's like a rabbit.
Serial killer.
Absolutely. I should be on trial at The Hague, I tell you.
We were talking earlier about the underletting. I mean, underletting generally is just because so that they don't get any dough balls. It's not because they want to reduce oxygen in the mash tun as such.
But it has that secondary effect, doesn't it?
Does it? Yeah.
Okay, so far we've talked all about not wanting oxygen in your brewing, but there is, as a lot of people will probably be aware, a point where you do want to actually get oxygen in, which is usually prior to pitching your yeast. And the reason for that is it's basically part of the, getting your yeast to grow and propagate within the beer, and during that initial kind of what's the word I'm looking for here, Chris? When the yeast
inoculation,
growth phase.
Yeah, something like that. So once you've inoculated the beer with your yeast, did I say propagation? I might have said that anyway. So yeah, your yeast basically is going to want some oxygen. I have seen a few things saying that like dry yeast, it's maybe not as important to
because it's
oxygenate.
it's already been
'Cause
oxygenated
it's
as
kind
part
of
of the
had
process.
that sort of growth phase has kind of happened, and then it's been dried at that point or something. I might have that slightly
It's got the
wrong, but
nutrients and all that in it. Yeah.
yeah. So that's when we do want oxygen. That's why we aerate the wort when it goes into the fermenter, or even some people might be injecting oxygen into the wort using O2 and an aeration stone. Yeah. So that's pretty much the only point where we want to deliberately add oxygen, and then the yeast is obviously hopefully going to gobble that all up, and you're not going to actually have that oxygen left over by the point where it's finished fermenting.
Just at this point, I'll jump in, Tricky. The reason why you want the oxygen in there is because even though yeast metabolize sugar to alcohol anaerobically, they still require aerobic metabolism in order to divide. So they bud and then they break off and they make more baby yeast by essentially growing small cancers on their own skin, which then become life forms of their own, which is a bit weird, but we'll go with it.
Lovely.
And they require oxygen to do that because oxygen, whilst it is a metabolic poison and it will seriously fuck you up in high concentrations, is required for certain chemical reactions during reproduction. So just to drop that one in.
The other one to drop in is olive oil. That's something I've tried as well. I think it bypasses the process of the yeast actually needing the oxygen, and it provides what it would require from them. I don't know the science behind it, Chris. Maybe you do, but
I haven't read into it, to be fair.
Yeah, there has been studies.
No fucking way I'm putting olive oil anywhere near my beer.
So it's just a small amount, and basically the yeast will use that up. So I've not had any head retention issues, because you would think, oh, the head's going to be totally smashed. But I've had no issues, and fermentation has just been like really, really good off the back of it.
Andy, am I right in saying that you have used it to restart fermentation when it's stalled?
Yeah, I have.
It's interesting.
Where you think maybe what's happened is because remember I'm doing a lot of taking yeast from the cone and reharvesting it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you guys are doing fresh pouches and stuff like that, there's not going to be any issues there. It comes to when you're on your third or fourth generation of a yeast and it's tired. If you give it that wee dash of olive oil, it just goes, oh yes, brilliant, we're back in game. Back in business.
So it must be something to do with influencing its kind of growth phase, perhaps.
Yeah, giving it what it needs.
Encouraging it to bud again. And then just back onto the subject of adding oxygen, I guess that's more relevant for certain styles of beer, right? Or higher ABV beers. So your imperial stouts.
I think in terms of if you're going to inject it, your
lagers. So where you can
achieve a like a reasonable level of dissolved oxygen just through the easy methods, like pouring it in and making sure it's kind of splashing into the fermenter. But I think for like you say, for the really high ABV beers where your yeast is going to be really pushed, that's when you need to really up the ante on the oxygen in order to allow it to produce enough yeast to be able to actually get through all of that sugar before it kind of conks out, basically.
Yeah, I guess.
Do any of you actually have oxygen or have ever used oxygen?
No.
I've got a carb. I do have a stone, and I've got a little aeration pump.
Yeah.
Because there was one point I was having problems with my beers, kind of early days. And I think, do you know what it was? It was the craft beer pie temperature sensor it was mashing way too hot, and I couldn't understand why it wasn't coming out at the right gravity. It was always finishing really, really sweet. And I'd bought an aeration stone to see if that would help to just pump oxygen into it to try and help push that fermentation. But then it was, I think I'd noticed when I was taking I tried, with a little mechanical temperature probe, and I was like, this is off by about 2 or 3 degrees here. So that's when I realised, it's actually mash temperature that's causing it.
So you had like a little aquarium pump or something, did you? And
yeah,
I mean, I've looked into that before, but you have to you have to have certain like really fine filters, don't you, on the air inlet?
That's right. Yeah, there is. There's a little filter, little circle disc thing.
Yeah,
it comes with.
Yeah, and when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, you know what? This was a long time ago, but I think those filters were quite expensive, and it was like seemed like a bit too much for a faff. And then when you read up, generally people go, you know what, just splash it in or give it a good shake once it's in the FE. Or I've actually sometimes if I'm doing a higher ABV beer, I'll get my mash paddle, like the stainless steel one,
just hit it.
and just like run it between my hands like that
to try
and just give it a good sort of whisk up.
Yeah.
That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, that's one way. If I could stick it in an electric drill, I probably would do. But the other end of the mash paddle's not, it's too big to fit in my drill.
You need a bigger drill.
I know.
That's what she said anyway. Hey! Right.
That's what he said.
Hey, whichever floats your boat. We're not gender biased on this show.
That's it.
So I think it's important to state at this point, from the moment you pitch your yeast, it is important to avoid any and all aeration and oxygen ingress from this point on. Okay? So at the point where your little pack of yeasties or your conical flask of yeasties goes into your beer and you put the lid on, at that point, you don't want any more oxygen in there. Are we all clear on this? Does anybody not understand?
Kinda.
Right? Do we need to make notes? All right,
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Because some of the shit I've seen on some of the brewing groups, y'all motherfuckers need help. All right, because y'all are doing stupid shit.
Like looking.
Yeah, dead badgers. That's all I'm saying. Right. So at this point, fermentation, and this is where I contradict myself in the very next sentence. Okay. Fermentation is generally done in a vessel which is airtight. Okay. Now I use air quotes on that one because some plastics are permeable to air. All right. In fact, a lot of plastics are permeable to air. So you can get oxygen ingress through the walls of your fermentation vessel, which not a lot of people know about. And irregardless of all that, the number of people when I started brewing who went, oh, no, you don't need an airlock, mate. Just don't quite put the lid on fully. No, off you fuck. I've always tried to have an airlock. I've only had one fermentation vessel where the airlock didn't work. And believe it or not, I used that one to grow potatoes. Okay, that's how much it annoyed me. But then there's the whole open fermentations debate, isn't there?
Yeah, because the krausen basically provides the cap during active fermentation, and then as obviously that finishes, they move it to a bright tank to protect against oxygen.
Yeah,
That's
but
kind of the key difference, isn't it? Yeah,
you're forgetting the CO2 blanket, though.
Oh yeah, there's that amazing CO2 blanket that's going to protect everything.
Well, the krausen's obviously creating it.
This is a level of magic that fucking Gandalf.
No, I think that's the key point, though, isn't it? Like the krausen is actually like a physical layer that's going to create a barrier. Like it's literally, not a solid, but a semi-solid layer that's actually going to literally cap the beer off. Everything coming up from underneath that is CO2, pretty much. So that does protect the beer. That will create a barrier to oxygen. But the blanket theory, it's just basic, physics of how gases, move around. It dispels that myth pretty much instantly, doesn't it? Like if you're in a sealed container up to a point, but as soon as you have any, movement of that gas or air, it's like out the window, isn't it? Really.
The reason why the blanket theory falls flat on its face is if the blanket theory was correct, you'd all be dead.
Right.
Because CO2 is heavier than oxygen.
That's what people say, though, isn't it? They say because it's heavier, it will just sit there and won't move. But it's like, okay, scale that up to planet Earth. We're all sat under a layer of CO2. Yeah.
No, mate,
Yeah.
it's because the planet's flat and it's it's flat.
The
So-
CO2 falls
how do I
off the
kick him?
edges, doesn't it?
How do I
Doesn't
kick him
build
out?
up.
It's a disc. It's a flat disc.
I'm pretty
No.
sure it's a disc on, isn't it? Isn't
On
it
the back
sort
of turtles.
To-
on a
elephants
some turtles swimming
and a
through
turtle.
space? I'm pretty
It's-
sure
it's
that.
an
The
infinite
turtle
tower
sucks
of
up all the
turtles.
CO2 for us and keeps
And
us
there's
alive.
no
That's
science
right,
can't explain it. Don't even
But
try.
see the krausen. Does the yeast on the krausen not actually use the oxygen as well to keep going? So some yeasts are actually, it has to be open fermentation because of if it was put under any pressure, it wouldn't quite work
Well,
as
that's
well.
why you don't. That's why you don't get as much propagation if you use a closed fermentation pressurized vessel and you charge your headspace with CO2 before before propagation has occurred. If that makes sense.
That's a good point, Chris, because what you're saying is you basically make sure that your spunding is set to the pressure it's going to be at. But then what you do is you release that pressure at the start of fermentation and let that build up.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I
Well,
do it.
I think open fermentation, there might be some factors. Largely, open fermentation is sometimes associated with spontaneous fermentation.
Lambics.
Yeah, lambics in particular, which actually require oxygen, right, in terms of the achieving the correct profile of the beer. In terms of, am I right in saying what type of yeast is it that creates the souring? It's not just lacto, but is it
Acetobacter, lactobacillus.
So acetobacter requires oxygen to add that slightly vinegary type thing, right?
Yeah, otherwise you'd end up producing ethanol because you wouldn't get the ester formation.
Exactly. So there's probably some elements there that also add to the need to there be a slight presence of oxygen. And also, when we were talking about krausen, there's a German word for the sort of dirty brown bits of the krausen, which I'm trying to look for, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But there is actually a word the Germans have for it.
Because it's German, it'll probably be 6 words just glued together because that's how German works.
Maybe. I don't think it is. But and it's
my favorite German
apparently
word of all time.
Go on.
Kugelwerfer.
That is a good one. What does it mean?
It's a type of weapon that they used in World War II with 6 barrels. A Kugelwerfer.
Kugelwerfer. I do
Fantastic
like that.
word.
It's very good.
There you go. It's a bit of trivia, for a Saturday night.
But this terminology for the sort of dirty brown krausen that often is sort of left on the side of the fermenter, like after its fermentation's finished, apparently is quite bitter. And I wonder if that's because it's the krausen that can end up oxidizing. And
that would
then
explain it.
You actually end up with a sort of much bitterer,
Martin Underwood said it's called shite.
Good. That's a technical term.
That's that great German word that we all know and love, innit, Martin? Shite.
Scheiße.
I remember reading it somewhere, but
to be fair,
I
these are
can't
the kind
remember.
of things that you come across when you read and you think, do you know what, that's going to be really fucking interesting, and then you forget it. Yeah.
Now, just coming back to like the open fermentation thing, that there are commercial breweries who do this. Like there's a good number of British breweries that still use kind of open. Like the Yorkshire Square is basically an open fermenter, right? That's correct. And then they'll be harvesting the yeast off the top of it, for top fermenting yeast or whatever. But as Andy said before, I think that's that initial phase goes through and then it goes to a bright tank in order to then basically keep it away from oxygen and potential spoilage as well. there are also some potential benefits for styles like wheat beers. So
Definitely, yeah.
Yes.
The oxygen can help those to develop a more prominent ester profile or particular like flavors from the ester profile. So I think for wheat beers, it can help to develop the
Bubblegum.
kind of clove and bubblegum flavors. Is that?
It's bubblegum, not clove. It's bubblegum.
Okay, more the bubblegum sort of thing. But yeah, it can basically impact on the esters and flavors coming out of your yeast through doing an open fermentation. So, it's, I guess, like, we need to sort of just clarify a bit, like open fermentation is done and can be beneficial in certain circumstances. But I think, if you are going to go down that route from a homebrew scenario, you really need to be making sure that you've got a properly sanitary environment to be doing that in, first of all, because
not a shed.
Your average shed, or garage, there's going to be so much, crap and dust floating around in the air that really, if you do an open fermentation, you're pretty much going to guarantee there's going to be some sort of
it's going to be a sour lambic, isn't it?
At the end of the day, you're going to get some lacto in there. I mean, like if you're milling grains in the same room or in the vicinity of where you're doing an open fermentation, you're going to get lacto in there because there's lacto all over grain and milled grain, and grain dust gets in there. You're going to end up with a pellicle on your beer. I pretty much can guarantee
cool.
that.
I might. Has anyone seen those kits where you can culture your own kind of localized yeast? Your terroir.
I've not seen a kit to do it, but
I do wonder what my garage tastes like. Can't imagine it's good.
Go and lick the floor and let us know.
Could be interesting.
Midlands, what's your favourite one, Owen? The
Midwestern.
US Midwestern, that's what it'll be. You'll culture it and you'll just get Midwestern.
It might be.
So anyway, I guess we're saying, like, generally for home brewing, most of the time you're going to be much better off pursuing a sort of closed and even better, properly airtight kind of fermentation. And if you were going to go down that open fermentation route, you need to make sure, like I said, everything's sanitary and that you're moving the beer on pretty quickly after that initial fermentation is done.
It comes down to timing, doesn't it, Tricky?
Yeah.
Because
it's the one case where you do want to have a secondary fermentation chamber.
Absolutely. Because if you are a day late, you're going to be a couple of dollars short. Let's put it that way. Because in the time it takes for that Krausen to drop, as soon as it drops and it's not protecting stuff anymore, you are going to get bacterial ingress, and that is going to cause a problem with your beer. So timing is everything. You're probably better off transferring it just as the Krausen starts to drop, but that's a whole level of monitoring that most people just cannot do.
When I saw the Arran brewery that does it with the open fermentation, they had the 6 tanks, right? They were like 6 big, massive stainless square things, but it was in its own room. So it was in a small room that held the tanks. So basically all they can use is that yeast for all their beers as well, because it being open fermentation is another point to make. But also it was then locked off in the sense of that room could be made sanitary to an extent.
Yeah.
And they
some breweries
as well, I'd imagine.
Some breweries, I think it's about actually, in some cases, like having that certain, like the local bugs getting into the beer. Like Harvey's Brewery, I think that I've seen a lot of stuff where they say, even if you get their like the base kind of yeast strain, you won't be able to recreate their beer because they have this like brewery, bug, for want of a better word, that goes into the beer and gives it that distinctive flavor.
It lives up in the rafters, apparently.
It's the same thing with Ringwood, right? Ringwood's
Brewery. The same as well.
Yeah. And, I've been there, and they've got the big metal fermentation tanks, which they tend to just have this kind of little porthole, if that's the right terminology, and that's left open. But I think as soon as fermentation's kind of beginning to kind of calm down, they'll then shut that off. And whenever they have like tours, they're always like, do not stick your head in that and breathe in because you will pass out.
They also put bags of random hops around the brewery when you're walking around as well. So there are, in order to avoid people from getting their recipes at Ringwood, they leave random bags of hops just randomly at certain places and different types of grain. So there'll be a 25 kilo sack of like black patent malt, and it'll be at the side of the fermenter that's got, or side of the mash tun that say, oh yeah, we did boondoggle in that this morning. And you're thinking, not with that fucking grain you didn't, dickhead. But yeah, it's kind of, it's like misdirection on an industrial scale to avoid people getting their recipes. It's quite good. And the old fella who does it is just, I swear to God, he is just pissed constantly. he must just be the most highest functioning alcoholic that there is in the world, because he must be hammered day in, day out. He's just ace.
I don't know if any of you do that. Do you guys, when you do brewery tours, have a look about and look at the stock?
Yeah.
Being homebrewers, I'm just like, what?
Oh yeah, 100%.
What are they using?
What's that packet
Simpsons
of hops down there? What's those grains?
Yeah, see, so fortunately, I did this brewery tour before I became a home brewer.
Well, they leave a bag of Pilgrim, and the reason why I knew it was a diversion was because it was best before 2011. Because it was one of the bags from Simply Hops, and it has an expiry date on it or a best before date on it, and it was 2011, and I did the tour in like 2015 or something.
Maybe they like to age them.
That's a secret.
Possibly, it's possible. But doubtful.
Aging of hops. That's an interesting subject to cover at some stage.
Yeah. If you want oxygen in your beer, let's go.
Well, no, it's interesting. Scott Yanish was playing around with sort of leaving out hops.
Hang on a sec. Scott Owen's talking about. Carry on, say his name again.
Hey, you got some wet wipes there, Chris?
Yeah, I have, just for you, mate. Scott Yanish.
There he is. He's an avid listener too, so he'd be thrilled to know that you're jerking off to him.
I'm not. I'm imitating you jerking off to him. You want?
Oh, sorry, that's what you do.
Uh-huh.
Not bad.
Scott Yanish. Yeah, I've yet to read his book. In fact, I've yet to even open his book.
It is all right.
I'll get round to it, when I finish the Kama Sutra.
Never.
It's taking me a while to get through that one. The wife keeps disturbing me. So, let us end the discussion of that little bit there, and let's move on to the earliest commercial break that we have done for a very, very, very long time. Let's go to the commercial break.
Let's do it. So, by the way, just while everyone's getting their beers sorted, that was Derek's Citra.
Oh, yeah,
vacant. So yeah, I think not getting the Parma Violets, Owen, but I do. Yeah, I definitely agree that the Citra's not really sort of showing up as much in terms of the kind of aroma and flavour there.
No,
or certainly not as much as you would expect with the amount that's gone in, particularly for the dry hop. So yeah, I'm not sure why that is, but it doesn't taste. There's no, sort of, bad or off flavors obvious in there to me. It just kind of tastes a bit more like a sort of, I guess, more lightly hopped kind of sort of a cask ale type thing rather than
it was quite. It was the carbonation was quite low.
Yeah,
and it was quite cask style.
And I think he did it with CML4, which is basically their kind of SO4 thing, and I can always, like, whenever SO4 is in a beer, I always kind of get that impression of it being more like a kind of traditional English ale, because I guess I'm just really familiar with that yeast being used by a lot of particularly kind of smaller breweries and stuff. So
whilst Tricky is giving somebody else a shout out, I'm going to give a shout out to Luke for this one, which is his IPL, and it's outstanding. It's very, very nice. Crisp, clean. I mean, clarity. Hello. Really, really nice beer. Not as much hops as I would put in it normally, but by no means a bad beer at all. Really, very, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So thanks, Derek, for sending the beer mails again, and everyone else has been sending us all beer mails. I think we've all been doing quite well on the beer mail front.
Yeah, I've done pretty decent, much better than I have. I've got those beers from Derek, and I'll be honest, I'm looking forward to the Van Can't gesture.
Johnny Apples Brewing has just said, "Hi guys, Chris has turned into a merch pimp."
Oh yes. So if you want your t-shirts,
the merch store will be launching shortly on the Hop.
If you want a t-shirt, they're £26 each. I don't think there will be that much. To be fair, I think they'll probably come in at about.
Well, if you get
15.
a decent order in, you can get them down to about £15 if you're going to repost them on afterwards. I think
Exactly. Yeah, about 15 quid a piece they'll be.
Anyway, I'm going to pop to
will be about 25. All right, mate. Luke, those beers are fantastic. I know you'll listen to this probably going through a Costa drive-through, hopefully at just this moment. So I'm sure Andy will join me in a chorus of Tex. Yeah, that's just for Luke for when he's going through a Costa drive-through. So Andy, you're sitting there. You're looking all pensive. You're looking like you're.
Yeah, I'm just researching into this beer.
What is it?
Hold on, 2 seconds.
Focus.
Let's get the shot. Come on, camera. Is it actually gonna?
You got to stop buying cheap cameras, Andy.
I know.
Need a more expensive camera, mate. That one's shit.
Total schmuck.
Is it my hand that will go? Yes, there we go. So there it's there. And the beer is
Overtone Stratosphere.
Nice.
Dipper.
Nice. Oh, Andy's gone down the dipper route.
So I've gone down.
Yes, lad.
Owen's going to have an alcohol-free one just to counterbalance it today, I reckon.
Oh, I'm going bigger than double IPA.
You're going bigger than 8%.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Andy, 8% a breakfast beer for Owen.
The one time I try and go big, you know, see if I can outdo him.
You're never going to outdo me, mate.
No.
Apart from on the brewing front.
So, Strata hops is on this, and Chinook. So Strata and Chinook, they've stopped putting in actually what their malt bill is. So they've just told you their hops.
Don't you have the head brewer on speed dial or some shit?
Yeah,
I could ask Dan.
I thought you'd sort of met him on Tinder or something.
Yeah, that's it. Grinder, mate. It was Grinder.
I thought it was Grinder.
Was it?
Or was it Bumble or whatever it's called this week?
I'm pretty sure you're having his children, are you?
Nah.
It would appear so.
But no, it will be good to do a collab in the future, that's for sure.
I'm just going to pull out my new glass and just place it lovingly there.
No, it will be the Hop Edition, mate. It won't be the High Road Brewery. It'll be the Hop Edition and Overtone.
So
I missed my chance to sport the new Dudes Brews hoodie actually. For this
shocking!
Poor.
So the Chinook, I've had Chinook before, which gives a kind of grapefruit marmalade type thing. I find it's
bit resiny, kind of sticky,
piney,
really sticky.
Piney, yeah. Sometimes pineapple as well, like more the kind of sticky pineapple.
Yeah, which is definitely what's coming through. So I'm like, well, where's the Strata? The Stratas might be this kind of passion fruit thing.
I love Chinooks too. They're my favourite dual blade helicopter.
Oh, on the nose, I think it is. It's been dry hopped with Strata, so that's going to be.
Strata's supposed to be like super dank, isn't it? It's supposed to be really.
That was
really
fucking funny.
weedy.
I can't believe you guys aren't laughing. I'll be honest. That was the height of humour.
I was trying to think of any other two-bladed helicopter that exists.
Russians made one, but I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But I don't know if because this beer might be a little bit older, but the aroma isn't punching
Have we
like
officially
an Overtone normally would.
Have we actually started the commercial break? Are we?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
we're well
doing
into
mine.
it.
Oh, we
yeah.
have. Oh, okay. So I went for a slash and.
I'm just doing mine while you are all getting ready.
Oh, sorry, we're really interrupting your commercial
Nah, it's
break.
fine.
there,
No,
review
do
here,
carry
or-
on.
Pants is
Do
good.
carry on, Andy.
Pants is good. But it's really, really. I mean, the body of the beer, with it being 8%, you don't taste 8% beer, that's for sure. It's got a nice kind of thickness to it. And it is the Chinooks, I think, for me, I think that's the flavour I'm getting is the Chinook is the daddy in this, which is an awesome, awesome hop. So the flavours, yeah, super, that kind of sticky Chinook vibes.
Is it possibly a combination of the two coming together there that you might be perceiving?
Correct,
Is
yeah.
is it just Strata and Chinook?
Yes. Yeah, that's what it says.
If you end up with two hops, and I'll say this because I've discovered this with a few hops, if you get two hops that blend so well together that you only taste one hop, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, that truly is. That's craftsmanship, is what that is. Because it's like I always find Citra and Equinox, when you mix them together, you don't get the two separate flavors. You get one combined, beautiful, gorgeous symphony of flavor. And it sounds to me like that's what you've got there.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
If you can
100%.
blend hops in a beer and end up with a symphony, then you're doing really, really well as a brewery.
I mean, Overtone are killing it big time.
I've still not ordered any of their beers, to be fair.
Yeah, I need to get on that.
Yeah.
I'm already in trouble with the wife, so I may as well get on it.
Tricky, you
for a
ordered some
penny, mate.
Overtone, didn't you?
I got some from the local bottle shop the other week. Yeah, so
Have you tried them yet? No.
Yeah, they're gone. They're long gone now.
Oh, yeah.
That was a couple of weeks ago. So
Beers don't
yeah,
last long.
what was one of them was a Yaldi or something like that. It was like an Yaldi oak, like an oak cream IPA. That was really good.
Yeah.
The other one I had was not as good. Yeah, it wasn't quite as good as that one.
Yeah.
It was the one that had Rawaka in it. It was more like an APA style one, but that was a bit grassy. I wasn't so keen on that. But I've had quite a few overtoned beers before, and generally they're pretty bang on. So
I'm just on their website, just having a quick look.
60 quid later, it'll be off their website.
Yeah, yeah. They do have is that a tipper?
Have they got any quippers?
I don't know, mate. Triple dry hopped, triple IPA. Take my money.
Owen's ordered a case of that shit.
Oh, man.
How much is that a can, Owen?
£26.
Thanks, Andy. I'll send you the bill.
Their stuff is amazing.
Right then, since nobody's jumping forward to go second and Andy's finished wanking over his mate Tom or Dan or Pete or Dave or Gary or whatever it's called, I'm going to go next. So, with my vocation beer in my vocation glass, I'm going to pour out this Hefeweizen
Nice.
from Vocation Brewery, a 5.6%. And it is called Bier ohne Bart. Now,
No.
I don't know what that translates to. I ain't got a clue. But it doesn't really matter because this is to do with International Women's Day, which I happen to support because I love women. They're my favorite type of female. And, it's actually celebrating Anne, Edina, Georgia, Katie, Leanne, Linda, Nikki, Rachel, Sally, Sarah, and the women in the brewing industry. Now, the artwork on this is fantastic. I think that's
That's
wonderful.
cool. It's a cool can.
You know? It's great. I really like it so much so I'm going to rip the label off and stick it on my fridge. And to be fair, the smell which I'm getting, and I'm bearing in mind I'm like a foot away from the glass right now. This is going to be a banger. This is going to be a banger because bubblegum, clove. I'm getting a little tiny bit of that banana, that super ripe banana thing. And I've not even tasted this yet. The colour, I mean, it's cloudy. It's a wonderful golden colour. I mean, yeah, that's going to be good, isn't
Chris, you'll need to let us know if it's stiff on.
I doubt very much it is.
What was the last word? Beer and
Beer on a bat.
Bart.
B-A-R-T. Bart.
Beer and beard.
There we go. So literally all this has in is malted barley and wheat. It doesn't tell me anything about hops. It doesn't tell me anything about hops, yeast, anything other than that. It's 2.5 UK units. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite.
How many pants?
It doesn't actually give me a pant rating.
Oh.
Put it in the bin.
Pant. Oh no! Wait.
Oh.
It's a 1 krona pant.
There you go.
They're the best pants.
The krona pants. Yes, I agree. This is just beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful. A really, really, really nice beer. It's traditional. I would guess, based on my, I will say, extensive research of Hefeweizens, I reckon that this has probably got Tettnang in it. I'm getting that little bit, that touch spiciness on it, just a little bit of spiciness. But I'm getting some real floral on the back end, which I would say Saz or Pearl. I mean, this is a stunner. Yeah, it's traditional. It's straight down the line. It's not fucking about. And it's doing exactly what it says on the can, which is beer. Hefeweizen beer.
Beer-flavoured beer.
Beer-flavoured beer. I mean, who'd have fucking thunk that shit would still sell, eh?
Is it as good as yours, Chris? Because
no, is it
yours... No,
mine's way better than this.
Of course not.
For all the listeners, Chris he did send us his mango hefe, and it is probably, I say probably, it probably actually is one of the best hefes I've ever had.
It was a decent one, that one.
Oh.
The thing is, with a Hefeweizen, the yeast sings. The yeast is everything, okay? The yeast is the flavour. The yeast is the smell. The yeast is everything in a Hefe.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose the wrong yeast, you'll suffer. Or if you try and do a ferulic acid rest, Owen? Yeah, he's muted, but he's agreeing with me.
I am. I'm nodding.
Is that the one where you scorch your malts and end up with toasted wheat beer?
Tricky.
Instead?
It wasn't one. It wasn't
it
one.
Was 4.
I think it was 3.
You can't brew a Hefe.
I can't. I fucking hate the stuff.
Have you had the one that I sent you down yet?
No, I haven't. I'm saving that for a beer review.
That is amazing.
It's decent beer. I like that one.
Decent. He's underselling it here. It's probably one of the best hefes you'll ever have in your life.
To be fair, I'm from Yorkshire, and the highest accolade I can give something is reasonable.
Everyone's like, oh, there's such an easy style of beer to make. I mean, I've made some complex beers and done it well, but for the life of me, cannot fucking make a simple ass Hefeweizen.
When all this bullshit's done, Owen, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll drive to Southampton one week.
Come down, mate.
We'll get battered, and I'll brew you 60 litres of a fantastic Hefe.
Show me how to fucking make it.
Some people just have that like bogey beer style that they can't fucking nail, don't they? Like, has anyone else got one that's caused them problems?
Yeah, I do on a very, very regular basis. I have a bogey beer style.
Which is?
Neepers.
Okay.
I'm no good at Neepers. I can do Imperial Pale Lagers. I can do nipples really well, but you asked me to put oats in anything, and I just fuck it right up. You know, it'll either come out way too thick, or it'll come out like just properly just strange, super sweet. It'll finish at 10:28. You know, I've had some proper weird crap happen to me with Neepers, and to be fair, I don't really enjoy the style that much. So I'm never going to brew it again, and it's not exactly a blot on my copybook because I don't really like them. But yeah, Neepers for me, they fuck me up every time.
Yeah.
This is banging, guys. Get onto Vocation and get some of this bought. Support International Women's Day, right? Because these ladies do a damn good job, and I know that Vocation's got quite a lot of women who work for them. And this is an absolute banger of a beer. And while you're there, just while I've got the mic,
are you going to give them a promo code?
I wish I could. But while you're there, order some of this as well.
Something sour, twisted.
Oh, wow! Chris has really turned a corner.
Jeez.
This is fucking
Who is this guy?
gorgeous. This
Who
is
is this
gorgeous. Don't get it too cold. You do not want this really, really cold. You want this at around about 8.5, 9 degrees when you drink it. This is a fucking banger. I've got 12 cans of this.
No way.
12 cans.
From the man only, what, a year ago? Maybe 15 months ago was like, sours aren't for me.
Yeah, fuck sours.
Can't drink them.
It's a banger, mate. It's an absolute banger. And this is beautiful. This is real. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this pint. So if somebody else start talking about their beer while I enjoy this pint in relative silence.
Me and you, Tricky. Do you want to
All right.
rock,
I'll
paper,
go.
scissors?
I'll go. Well, yeah. I'm sort of halfway down mine, so I think I better start talking about it before I try.
We'll assume you won.
Yeah. So I have got a Frost West Coast IPA from Little Monster Brewery, who are coincidentally, as we were talking about Harvey's Brewery, they're down in Sussex as well. So whereabouts are they?
Fucking hell, this is beautiful.
East Grinstead. Not quite as south coast as Harvey's. Anyway,
It's about 30 miles. In fact, no, it is Harvey. No, Harvey's. Yeah, Harvey's is just outside East Grinstead.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's
I should
Graham
know.
not there.
It's closer to where I used to live than where you.
Okay.
Where you
My
live, but anyway.
boss, my old boss, when I worked down in London, lives in East Grinstead, and the Harvey's Brewery is just down the road from him.
Really?
Yeah. He's Googling it.
I'm checking.
He doesn't believe me. He's gonna Google it.
It's reasonably close, but I don't think it's that close. East Grinstead is near Crawley, so it's a bit not on the coast. Anyway, yeah, but that's why the fuck are we worrying about where it is? Anyway, it's got
That's the geography
Centennial
lesson.
yeah, Centennial, Cryo, Cascade, Chinook, and Simcoe. So all the sort of slightly more old school West Coast hops in there. The aroma is, as far as the hops go, pretty subdued, to be honest. I'm getting quite a bit of the sort of caramel on this. You can see by the color of it, it's a fairly more kind of amber sort of color for an IPA. So, I think with West Coast IPAs, you tend to get either the ones that are really kind of light and there's a very low level of sort of caramel malt in it, or you get the ones like this which are a bit more
traditional
intense in terms of the color and the
that's a traditional IPA.
The amount of caramel malt in there. So, and I do get that sort of more of the caramel maybe, and then just that sort of sweet kind of citrus rind aroma, but it's not really massively pungent on the aroma.
Is it bready at all? Or is it clean?
It's fairly clean, but just that sort of kind of caramel sweetness on there, really,
Good.
I think.
Right, yeah.
It doesn't really have that kind of like, sort of
Bready caramel.
nutty or bready kind of thing going on.
Yeah. I'm not a massive fan of
And then flavor wise, again, the hops are not quite punching out on this one as much as I might have expected. It's a 7% beer as well, so you'd think it would be pretty hefty on the hopping. So there's caramel sweetness, and then it's all kind of citrus peel sort of. Bitterness is quite punchy, but it's not massive, or certainly not as high as it can be for a West Coast. Yeah, quite dry finish. I mean, it definitely ticks the boxes as a West Coast IPA, but it's just not quite hitting the mark for me in terms of like the hop flavor and aroma, which is a little bit, certainly when you read that list of hops, it's not quite as exciting as I would have hoped. It kind of looks a little bit like the one that I made, but excusing the rampant hubris, it's my one's better that I've got on tap outside at the minute, to be honest.
Is it maybe a little bit oxidized?
Nah, it's not oxidized. I think it's just,
lacking punch.
Yeah.
It's commercial.
Don't know.
Well,
maybe,
no, I think there's some truth to that, right? Like, take the cheeseburger cavalry you brewed recently. You know, you got some examples of that in can and were fairly underwhelmed, and then people have subsequently brewed it, and actually shouldn't be underestimated. Home brewing and doing it well, you are going to get fresher beer,
100%.
traveled less far, and it is on the most part going to be better than commercial beer, right?
It's a good example because in the case of that particular beer, I think the cans that most of us got when we tried it out before the brew day, it did just taste like a really tired kind of IPA that I don't know whether it was a end of. I mean, they sort of moved brewery, I think, at some point fairly recently, Left-Handed Giant. I don't know whether like that was a batch that was sort of from the old brewery prior to the move or something like that. I don't know.
It could be the new brewery and have not dialed it in yet.
Yeah, it could be that. Or they could have been offloading old stock or something. Before they moved.
Stock, that's what I'd probably put it down to.
I suspect it might have just been like cans that have been sat around on a pallet in the old place, and they were like, "Oh, we've got to shift this. We'll offload it," because all of it was bought like via Cloudwater as well, so it was like a second, third party sort of.
They probably heard we were doing a Zoom brew day and thought, "Oh, we better ship this out," so they go buy it up.
Could have been that.
Yeah, all like 18 cans of it. I'm sure everyone bought it in total.
Massive uptake
massive order
on the cheeseburger. All of a sudden,
we're a big crowd. We can really move markets.
Giant Bristol brewery.
Right, am I up?
Anywho, Owen, go.
Right, I've got something special and exciting for us tonight. I've got another American beer. It's a high ABV beer. It's 10%. I've got a beer from Allagash, which is
what?
Yes. So I got a beer from Allagash Brewing Company in Portland, Maine.
What the?
Who I think generally their white beer, their wit beer, which I tried to clone recently. I think
White, yeah.
Johnny Denton, Johnny Apples cloned it as well fairly recently. To which I do have a bottle of his in the fridge to try. But this is their Barrel and Bean, which is a triple ale aged in bourbon barrels and blended with cold brew coffee. So it's a Belgian triple golden ale, aged in bourbon barrels for 7 weeks, then blended in cold brew coffee. They add which adds notes of vanilla, caramel, and a dash of cold brew coffee. And I have to say, I mean, the beer is, as you would say, Tricky, there's a lot going on there.
Oh, wow. It's pale.
It is pale, yeah. I mean, it's not dark. Right?
That's interesting. So it's not using roasted malts or anything?
No, I mean, it is a triple, which typically is a lighter beer. And they've managed to add coffee without the colour. Here he goes. You get like that beautiful level of carb.
For those of you who need it, it's right here.
Yeah, excuse me while I fetch the lotion.
Just a bottle of lube. Hold on.
I've been waiting 6 episodes to do that.
Oh dear.
Well, yeah.
Strap yourselves in because I haven't even got to the aroma yet.
Oh,
I'm going to talk about the carbonation. The carbonation on this beer is beautiful. I'm not sure if you get it from Belgian beers. There's just this really fine carbonation that adds this lovely mouthfeel to the beer. And you take a swig, it's pretty warming. There's like a lovely warming vibe going on. It's not bitey,
100%. Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's just, and it just slithers down.
Oh, mate. Give me a minute, boys. I'll be back in a sec.
There's hints of the Belgian influence to the beer. There's a really nice kind of almost like golden syrup-esque kind of vibe to it.
Wow.
You know, and it's not toffee, it's not burnt caramel, it's kind of more of a
sweet sugary caramel.
Yeah, like a that sort of golden caster sugar kind of thing going on. And then the coffee is very well balanced within it. The coffee kind of almost is like an aftertaste to the sort of nice warmth that then just runs off. And they've not over coffeed this beer, and it is absolutely beautiful.
Do you think Owen's enjoying it, guys? Give me a thumbs up.
I'm enjoying listening to it.
Give me a thumbs up on the YouTube chat if you think Owen's really enjoying this beer just the right amount.
I mean, it's
despite your like fantastic and eloquent description of it, I'm still finding it hard to imagine like a sort of coffee infused triple or whatever.
It is. I mean, all I'd say was it's complex. There's not too much coffee. You don't even pick up the coffee on the aroma. It's just a very subtle afterthought almost to it,
on
Richard Brooks says, "Fuck it, it's probably oxidized."
It's definitely not oxidized. And maybe there's some complexity added by the bourbon barrels, but it doesn't jump out at you. Everything's very just like tightly knit.
Is there vanilla on it, Owen? Because of the bourbon,
you get like a little bit of vanilla, but it's nothing within it is particularly pronounced. It's a beautifully balanced beer. It's very interesting. If you guys get a chance to grab one, then do so.
Can I just say
really
that
nice.
As somebody who sits here, who I like to put a bit of effort into my commercial beers. I like to put a bit of effort into thinking, do you know what? I'm going to get something which is going to express me as a human, as my beer choice. This is my moment to let my taste in beer shine. And then Owen goes, "Fuck you! I've got something from Maine. It's a triple and it's coffee infused, and I'm going to make you play fucking Marvin Gaye and have a wank while I'm
aged
doing
in
this
oak
review."
barrels.
Yeah. It's not like you're fucking gone, nah, this is £3 and from Morrison's. This is £22 and I imported it direct and it was frozen the whole fucking way. That's what Owen's done. You
I
can
don't think it was. I think I picked it up off Honest Brew, maybe. I think I got it from Honest Brew and it wasn't even that expensive,
No, just £12 a can, I
don't think it was. I think it was pretty reasonable for a bottle.
I've just finished my
quid.
Hefe and it's fucking stunning. So much so I'm pissed off I only bought one. In fact, Dexter's, which is the salted caramel stout that I got from Vocation, or it wasn't Vocation. Who did that one? Kirkstall Brewery. To be fair, that was shit. That was awesome. And I'm still wanting a pint of whatever it is that Owen's just had.
Right,
don't
so is
want-
that
you don't
commercial
want a
break
pint.
wrapped up?
You don't want a pint of that.
What, do I want a thimble of that?
No, you 2/3 at most.
Is it a bit hefty?
Well, it is 10%. So
That's a bit hefty.
There is
then,
that
isn't
to
it, really?
consider.
yeah.
I'm out of beer, boys. What's
Don't
wrong with you?
expect any sense from me for the next hour.
Do we
Yeah.
do we move on? Are we moving
To
on?
be fair,
I
Owen,
think so.
if you neck
Yeah.
the rest of that pint, then I'll buy you another can.
It came in a bottle, but no, I'm not going to do that.
Do you know what I'm going to have?
I did bring
I'm gonna
this up
have
with
this.
me though. So
Fucking hell. Now he means business.
Is that
Good
bourbon?
choice of bourbon, by the way. Buffalo Trace is fucking
yeah, that's bourbon, mate. It's lovely.
That's some good shit. Fuck your Jack Daniels and your Jim Beam bullshit. That's proper bourbon.
We're going sour, boys. We're going sour.
So, I mean, are we going to carry on with the oxygenation thing, or are we just going to fuck that off and get pissed?
Hang on.
We
Hang
tried
on,
to
just-
keep it subdued, but we might. Can we just do one?
We went too
podcast
early.
where it's
We
just
peaked
us
too
getting
early.
pissed?
I'll
It
be
just
honest.
disintegrates into madness.
Can we just say this? Oxygen's fucking bad. Don't put it in your beer.
Right,
We
Yeah,
were
how
going to
much
give
was-
you a load of tips, but apparently we're just getting arseholed now. So sorry, guys.
Can we?
Let's do this.
Yeah, I really want us to just do a podcast that's just entirely beer reviews. It's just a commercial break. It's just the commercial podcast.
Well, no, because if it was beer reviews, then surely we would have to have like beer mails and commercials and a pass from our wives for at least 2 days afterwards. We'd have to record it on a Friday night because the weekends are
I'll
fucking
book my
right
spot
off.
on the sofa like in advance.
I'd be sleeping in a fucking shed, which ain't a problem with this chair. Check this one out, boys. Oh, it's a bed.
Woo!
Smooth,
Wow.
smooth.
I think
Chris.
he just stress tested.
You almost kicked that
Yeah.
pint up into the air.
Yep. This chair's amazing.
Wow.
That's even hilarious.
Generally for home brewing, keeping a vessel closed is probably a better idea, and avoid inserting dead badgers. Very important. Dead
Lovely
badgers and beer-
transition there. Straight back
Dead
into
badgers and
it.
beers, they do not mix. I've got to push my little thing back in. I did style it out, didn't I? I did.
Yeah, you push your little thing back in. It's popped out again, hasn't it?
Yeah, my little thing's always popping out. Wife don't mind now. Fucking hell, that's a good beer. You guys need some of that.
Gone. I've lost the plot now. What were
You
even
guys
talking
need
about?
that. It's ace.
Everyone just wants to get wrecked now.
I think Chris was talking about closed.
Badgers.
Badgers.
What's a badger?
Badgers are always closed. Yeah. So,
And
what
the
we're
next
talking-
line says, "Beware the suckback."
Beware the setback.
Now that's important advice.
That
so
is good advice. Yeah, that is.
go on, Tricky. You carry on. You're
To
the
be
one.
fair,
with
I think
the-
I did put that line on the note. So
You did. Crack on.
You love a bit of suckback, don't you, Juggy?
We all love a bit of suck
in
back.
the right context.
Yeah.
But in this context, we're talking about cold crashing specifically. So I think this is one of the points where you can maybe inadvertently introduce some air and therefore oxygen into your previously
or star sand.
sealed container. Oh yeah, start a good point. Or star sand. So when you're cold crashing, you're going to be basically the volume of your beer is going to reduce because of the basically the volume kind of decreasing. That's going to draw air in through the airlock, which if you've still got it basically with an airlock connected or even with a blow off tube or whatever, is going to draw first of all the liquid out of the airlock through into it. So you're going to dump potentially a load of star sand into your beer, and then after that it's going to also be drawing in air and therefore oxygen. So there's a potential route for oxidation via that. And there's a couple of things you can do to avoid that. I think most of us at this point would basically say just fucking go and buy a Firmzilla.
I mean, seriously, that is the best option, isn't it?
Apart from Andy, sorry, because
I'd say just go buy a Unitank.
Yeah, Andy will tell you to sell your kids, sell your house, sell your wife, sell both your kidneys, and go buy a Unitank.
Well, in fairness, they're all Unitanks. We're talking about different types of Unitanks.
Okay, Andy's talking about a stainless steel SS Brewtech Unitank, which will cost you your firstborn.
The F40 and the F80.
Oh yeah,
they're
fucking cheap as chips, though, aren't they, Andy?
Well, we don't know yet. The price
yes, we do, because they've been released. They're only 1,700 quid a piece.
No, that's the F100 and the F150.
Why would I spend the same amount of money as I spent on a year at university to buy a fucking fermenter?
Anyway,
it's shiny.
If you don't want to sell your children on the dark web in order to fund your FV buying, the other option is basically to get a balloon and like fill that up with CO2. So what I've done in the past, and I mean, I've basically moved on to just using a couple of all-rounders, and I did actually manage to sell the. Sorry, Andy, I did manage to sell the stainless conical, but. What I did when I was using that was basically use the
Andy is disappointed in Tricky.
The last little bit of the fermentation to fill up a balloon with CO2. So I'd basically swap the airlock out for a little bit of tube, plugged into a foil balloon, and that fills up with the CO2. And then when you get to the point of cold crashing, it's just going to draw CO2 back in, basically. So you're creating essentially a closed fermenter with a little bit of a reservoir of CO2 that can be drawn back in. When you cold crash, you're not going to have the issue with the sanitizer getting drawn back into your FE, and then obviously the air and oxygen afterwards. So you can maintain that closed environment up to the point where you then want to transfer it. And if you do a closed transfer, you know, again, by the way, you don't necessarily have to have like a gas system in order to do closed transfers. You can do it under gravity, as long as you've got a purge sort of container. I mean, we are talking about kegging here, so you know, like closed transfers kind of goes out the window when you're bottle conditioning.
Yeah, it's not possible, is it?
You can't do it.
Not always.
But anyway, so if you are doing a transfer into a keg and you don't have a pressurized container, you can do it under gravity and maintain a closed transfer as long as you've purged the keg beforehand, because you basically just hook the outpost on the keg up to the where your airlock would go, and then you just drain under gravity, and it will basically replace the air or the CO2 in one container with the CO2 out of the other. So there's a video on Dudes Brews, by the way, for that, if you just want to pop along there and watch that.
Dudes Brews. Hashtag Dudes Brews. Hashtag High Road Brewery. Hashtag Blue Pants Brewer.
You probably ought to plug your new Facebook page, Tricky.
Oh, that's good. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, Dudes Brews has a new Facebook page. Go and click on that for all the updates on the channel.
The only cunt not making money out of this podcast is me, isn't it?
I'm not making any money.
No, never. I'm just here for the
Tricky.
funds.
I'm sure.
Don't quit the day job though. It's definitely not.
It's not as lucrative as you think.
If it pays for a sack of malt every 2 months, it'd cover my brewing.
You're making more money selling second-hand hand pulls, I think.
Yeah, exactly. For all your second-hand hand pull needs, visit Millington Services Direct.
Oh yeah, it's MSD. We like
Millington Services Limited.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
He delivers a good hand pull for the right price, I've heard.
But
I love a good hand pull.
Tricky. Sorry, just on we were talking there about how you're doing your transfers and all that, and people with the stainless steel and stuff. So I've got the Chronicle fermenter. It's not a Unitank as such, but what it has is a 1.5 inch tri-clamp fitting at the top, which allows me to put a disco, a conic egg type disco gas post on it, the bowl, and I can then the best tool ever is a Spunden valve, because the Spunden basically allows it to vent off, but it's then doesn't allow it to return.
Yeah,
So
it's a
we're
check
talking
valve,
about,
isn't it? Basically,
yeah, it's a
in
check
that,
valve.
yeah.
So everything, it doesn't let that oxygen get back in. So with it being stainless and stuff, I can keep an eye on the pressure, and then when it goes, I can allow. Basically, I can get up to 2.5 psi now, and I can then basically I'll put it right up to 2.5 as I'm cold crashing, and then I'll come in maybe the next morning and have a look and just top it up with the gas, and then that way I don't get any of that suck back as such as we were talking about. Max boost 2.5 psi.
Max boost.
Max boost.
Yeah,
But
I'm not
keeps
sure
it
if
all
you're.
oxygen-free.
I'm not
Sorry,
sure
man.
if you're a home brewer if you haven't had star sand sucked back into your Effie.
Oh, how brutal is that?
It's happened to me a few
that?
times, and I've never worried too much. You know.
Where did that half liter bottle of Star Sand go?
Yeah, that's like, oh,
Do you know
I
the
think I
weird
know.
thing though?
I think I know where that's gone.
You know the weird thing though? Nobody ever notices that.
No one
Yeah,
cares.
Yeah,
but
to be fair, it doesn't really seem to have that drastic.
Well,
Well,
it's
that's
quite
water, right?
foamy. It's got quite a big head, isn't it, when you pour it?
Yeah.
That's
There's a snake coming off the top of the
I've worked
pint when
it
you pour it
out.
out.
That's why Andy doesn't have head retention issues with his olive oil. It's because he's got half a litre of Star Sun in his beer.
Star Sand in it, mate.
Has anyone seen those beers from Staggeringly Good? The ones that the sours that are sort of, they're like the head's like super foamy. There's like big bubbles coming out of them and stuff. So anyone seen those?
No.
I reckon they might have just like chucked in a half a litre of Star Sand, maybe. I don't know.
Oh
dear. Chris
I don't
Harrison
think
reckons.
they have, by the way.
Chris Harrison reckons your Unitank brew bucket thing, whatever it is you've got, he reckons it could go higher than 2 psi.
What, mine?
Yeah.
It's not that. It's got a PRV. It's got a little valve in the lid, and I've already filled it with washers.
Just weld it. Just borrow a TIG off someone and just weld the hole shut. Job done.
Nah, because the last lid I had, the weld failed round where the tri-clamp was fitted.
Right, it's probably the seals on the tri-clamps that can't handle the pressure. You reckon?
It's a lid. Well, the lid, the clips that go on, the 6 of them or whatever, they'll eventually just blow off. So all I need it is just to make sure I can cold crash. I'm not carbonate as such. So it's literally what we're talking about tonight. It is to stop oxygen getting into that fermenter.
So it's not really a uni tank, is it?
Mine's is not. No, it's a conical fermenter.
I'm going to be with you here, Andy, and I'm going to say I agree with you that the spunding valve, when everything's taken into account in brewing, when home brewing specifically, when everything's taken into account, the spunding valve is probably the single greatest gadget that we've ever had.
No, it's not. It's the tilt. Tilt's the greatest gadget, mate.
Oh, fuck yourself. Jesus. Seriously, go buy some butter, lube your fist up, and then shove it up your own ass, okay?
Mate, tilt.
Fuck off. No, it's one of them things. It's like, I firmly believe that without the spunding valve, 90% of what we achieve with closed transfers, with pressurized fermentation, with all that other stuff, would not be possible.
Tilts are still the best.
Tilt's,
Fuck off.
Tilt's number one.
You're both wankers. This twisted sour, by the way. Oh my good lord, this is fantastic. This is amazing, and I am battered. I was talking to the guys on Thursday night. We were talking about the podcast and what we were going to do and where we were going to go, and I pointed out to him that I was actually having beers on that night, and it was the first time since the last podcast that we'd recorded that I'd actually had a beer. My tolerance has waned, boys. It's waned. It's not good.
We've got some training to do.
Enjoy the hangover
between now and the open brew day. The brewery open day. Sorry.
Oh, I need to get back on it. I need to have at least 3 or 4 pints every night just to get my tolerance.
You need that tolerance, you do.
I do.
Just 3 or 4 pints of impy every night.
Especially when it comes to you'll find this out when you go to a brewery open day, right? But it is an atmosphere conducive to massive levels of drinking. And it's just, the beers are so good, they're so fresh. If you talk to Kia nicely, all right, with a correct, if you wait until he's at the perfect amount of being pissed, you can get samples out the FVs. All right, it's just fantastic. It's absolutely superb.
I seen Kia put up that he got a new tank.
Yeah, he got another one. So he's increased his production rate by about 20%. I think it is.
So 2025, yeah.
So effectively, he has 4 FVs right now, and he's got a 5th.
Yeah.
But he pumps out beer like he's run out of passion.
Fairly certain my maths is pretty good there. So
I don't think it is. It's not like you do anything with numbers on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. No, he's got all uni tanks as well.
Good.
Right. Come on, let's plow through the rest of this shit. So
yeah,
we can just have an hour with the lads getting fucking battered.
So we're gonna talk about dry hopping now. So what this is a fairly key area of homebrewing, particularly for a lot of styles. A lot of styles are dry hopped. Not all, but quite a lot, particularly the popular ones at the moment. So guys, what are your preferable options to dry hopping to keep oxygen out, because it is a key point in the process where
I think
typically
it's one of these,
you're opening the lids, right? There is a risk, you're going to add oxygen.
The blanket.
It's one of those. It's one of those situations where, like you say, unless you are doing something a little bit more fancy, you inevitably have to open the fermentation vessel to air in order to deliver the dry hop, which is where the concern comes from in terms of introducing air and therefore oxygen into it. Now, again, coming back to using mainly the Firmzilla All-Rounder now for my FV.
There you go.
What I personally do is just
mainly shit. You've only got all-rounders now.
Well, no, I've still got the Speedle one that's just sitting on top of the fridge. But basically, I will just open the lid as briefly as possible, chuck the hops in, and then purge the headspace. That's pretty much what I do. I have seen a lot of people recently who are coming up with various contraptions in order to get the hops in without even opening the FV to air, which can include things
the Coke
like
bottle and all that shit.
ball valves and Coke bottles and freeway connectors and all that sort of shit. There's also people who are like basically coming up with these sort of like magnetically released little I guess little shells for the hops that they put inside the fermenter, and then they pull the magnet off and it drops the hops in. And all this sort of shit. I mean, for me, it's like stuff like that. Like, I'd rather keep the hops in the freezer, like airtight, than leave them for, I guess, potentially up to a week or more at room temperature, open to oxygen, to degrade while they're in the fermenter. I guess you may be trading off a little bit of time there, where they're potentially also in a fairly sort of warm and moist atmosphere. Anyone else think about that?
I do like a warm, moist atmosphere, though.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like those hops sitting in that bottle or on that shelf inside the fermenter are not in ideal storage conditions while they're waiting to go into the beer.
They're not. I mean,
no,
to be fair,
they're sat ambient for a start.
Yeah.
Number one, you've got your trade-off here, haven't you? You've got your trade-off between oxygenation or degradation of those hops. Because those oils, those flavor oils, they are going to degrade under those circumstances, rather. So you've got that to take into account. But you've also got to take into account the effect that it's going to have on a beer. Now, if it was a NEPA, but I was fermenting it out with any type of kvike, which I probably would do if I was going to do, I would use Hornidal, and I would basically get it done in a couple of days, drop them hops in. But then you've got the fact that you're going to be ramping it to 35. So essentially those hops are going to be partially cooked. You've got all of that going off. Everyone likes it moist. Ba-ding. I do think that there's a trade-off. And you have to take into account which is the worst evil. Is it opening your lid, but taking precautions, which we're going to cover in a moment, to prevent the ingress of oxygen? Or is it storing your hops at 35 degrees for basically 2.5 days before you actually get to the point where you're doing the dry hop? Which one's the worst? And I think the reality when it comes to NEPAs is it's going to be opening your lid. Whereas for any other beer, I think it's going to be the fact that your hops are going to be sat at 20, 19, 22, 24, whatever it is, whatever beer you're producing. I think it's the fact that those hops are not going to be refrigerated for that period of time or frozen, which, let's face it, we all freeze our hops, don't we? So that's going to be the worst one. It's kind of 6-5 pick 'em, which way you're going to go. Personally, I always go with basically leaving the CO2 because I've talked about my fancy rigmarole connector that I've got that runs CO2 into my FV at the same time, and I can just crack the lid and blah, 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 and it's purging and positive pressure and all that shit. And I would rather just dump my hops into that, purge the headspace a little bit, and away we go, knowing that my hops have been kept under optimal conditions. But if you're going to be keeping your hops in suboptimal conditions to prevent oxygen ingress, I believe you're missing a massive point, which is you have to take care of both. And by taking care of both, you're going to have to find another solution to the issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a classic case of over-engineering here. And
yeah, massively.
I think if anyone's listened to the last few podcasts, I think I ranted about this for a little while. I think on the subject of the MacGyver, Firmzilla, Coke bottle contraptions that people are coming up with. And, it's just, in my view, is if you're using an FV, open the lid. Don't be afraid of opening the lid if it's for the right purpose. Don't open the lid and just stare at your beer. Don't take a photo and post it on Facebook and ask if it's all right.
Don't throw dead badgers in.
Don't allow dead badgers to climb in and have a swim. Just if you need to dry hop it, right? Yeah, don't do that. Definitely don't do that. Not unless you want a really funky, nutty flavour.
I mean, unless you're trying to nurture your own personal yeast, that's a different thing, isn't it?
Don't be afraid.
Sack sour.
Yeah, open up the lid, chuck the hops in, close the lid quick. If you can, and there is an option,
Gonad sour.
I think you guys you've lost the will to live now. I used to. Back in when I first started.
No, scrote sour. Scrote sour is the name. That's what
I'm just getting shut.
Keep going, Owen. Keep going.
No, I'm not.
Come on, Owen. Owen, we love you, man.
Sorry, Owen. Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah, we're up past.
Back in the day, I used to, you can get those CO2 charged bicycle pumps that you fill up bike tires with, right? If you're on the move and you don't want to use a proper hand pump, you just have those little CO2 bottles and you can sort of fire CO2 with it. I used to have one of those. So when I used to have plastic buckets, I used to dry hop and then I'd purge the headspace just using one of those. And on reflection, I probably should have been buying proper CO2 from from a homebrew supplier rather than like bicycle tire CO2 bulbs. I'm not quite sure what quality of CO2 it may have been a fair bit of lead being fired into all manner of other contaminants.
All right, lead sinks to the bottom. You'll be okay.
Yeah. So I wouldn't advise that now, but on reflection, I was always very aware of this sort of CO2 thing from quite an early point.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, I think another good technique I've used because I can is I've got the ability to attach some discos to the very bottom of my FV because I've got the Firmzilla with the detachable yeast cup, and it has 2 ports for the discos, so I can actually really slowly bubble CO2 up through the beer So when I've got the lid open, there's only CO2 coming up through. Oxygen can't get in. I add the dry hop, put the lid back on. It's effectively purging all of the headspace anyway.
Yeah, I've tried doing that with the all-rounder a few times just by bubbling gas down through the dip tube, which effectively creates the same thing. And it's worked really well on a couple of occasions, but then on a couple of occasions I've actually accidentally blasted it with too much pressure and it's just knocked the tube off the end of the fucking post. In which case I'm like, well, that's fucked. Right, trying to keep it closed because now I've got to fish the fucking tube out with like a pair of tongs or something, and it's just
in your hand.
So
exactly. The whole thing is like, well, I really shouldn't have bothered there. Just
Andy really wants us to look at his.
No, I'm just showing when you were talking about your yeast brink at the bottom, and this is the exact same thing. It just gives you a 1.5 tri clamp that then allows you to put a gas port, so you can then put positive pressure under the bottom, and then that pushes CO2 up.
And how big does that make your cock?
Oh, I don't know. It's fucking heavy, by the way.
I've always wondered, does it make it really purple or?
It's about that size.
Do you need a lot of lube or?
You just got to make sure you attach the gas to the right bit, otherwise it slows it back in.
It's 1.5 inch dry clamp.
Once it goes in, it just scoots straight up.
I'm sure Andy's fine with a 1.5 inch tri clamp. There's probably plenty of room around the outside, to be fair.
Dear. Anyway, on a serious point,
like a fly in a Smarty tube.
So where are we in the notes? Anyway, we're down
I think we've talked about. In fairness, the dry hopping options. If
you're going to dry hop, I'm going to be honest now. The best way to dry hop is with a few points left. Okay, so if you've got a few points of your gravity left before you finish fermentation and you dry hop, then it's fucking sorted. All right, but there's the current thing of dry hopping at 14 degrees. And my next brew is going to be quite a big American wheat. So I'm going to do quite a heavily dry hopped American wheat. So I'm not going to be fermenting on the last few points. I'm not going to be dry hopping at the last few points. I'm going to be dry hopping at 2 degrees. So I'm going to dry hop after the cold crash is done. And the way I cold crash, I have a CO2 connector on the top of the Firmzilla. So I charge gas during the cold crash to carbonate the beer. I'm just going to leave that connected, undo the lid, and basically throw my dry hop in. That's what I'm going to do. And to be fair, if you've got positive pressure within the fermenter, the oxygen ingress is going to be minimal.
Yeah, I think we've just talked about that.
Why we're worrying about this shit?
Yeah,
we are. We are worrying about it
concept.
because we're connecting all this shit up. We're not just using a bucket and just throwing shit in and a badger doesn't crawl in there.
Yeah,
you know,
we've
got fucking complex systems here, but we're all running crazy systems here because of this issue.
But
they work.
Chris, you touched on like one of the things that we thought about, which and some people swear by is dry hopping during active fermentation, which I know we've talked about in the past. And some people will add their dry hop a few points before final gravity. So you're naturally getting that sort of, you're going to get that CO2 blow off anyway. But equally, as you say, the oxidation process is quite quick. So that may not necessarily mean that it's going to help. And in reality, a lot of the time, if you are dry hopping, and in my opinion, and happy to debate, but if you're dry hopping during active fermentation, there's a very good chance you're blowing off a lot of those hop aromas.
There's more than a good chance.
Through the airlock.
Definitely blowing them off.
So, in my opinion, like I've never been in favour of that. I've always dry hopped once. I rarely ever double dry hop. I normally dry hop once fermentation's completed. But we also talked a bit about whirlpooling. So there's not always necessarily a need to dry hop. Whirlpooling can add a significant amount of hop flavour and aroma to the point where you may not necessarily need to even dry hop. So that is an option. because then you're not even opening the FV. And the other option was keg hopping.
Yeah. I mean, keg hopping's a good idea if you want to chew on your hops.
Yeah, I mean, I've keg hopped a few times, but probably for quite a different reason. Not to avoid oxygen. It was just I was unhappy with the level of hop aroma or flavour that I'd got from the beer, and wanted to just up it. And I've done it probably 3 or 4 times, and it's worked really well generally. But some people might do a slightly different technique where they might like transfer a beer into a keg that has dry hops in it, and then they have some sort of filter on it, and then they can rack the beer off that keg and into a serving keg. You know, that's one way of dry hopping a beer.
Yeah.
That is actually operating on a closed system.
That's cool, yeah. I thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you would actually, so you would take it from the FE, transfer it to a keg with hops already in it, purged.
Yeah.
Leave it in there for however predetermined time you want it for your dry hopping, and then you would transfer it from that keg into another keg that's your serving keg.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a whole
Probably
level
want to
of
be
complexity,
making
isn't
sure
it?
that you're doing that off of a like the one with the hop in. I guess a floating dip tube or something would be pretty essential for that, wouldn't it? If you're going to like cold crash it in the keg and then
I've seen people take those dry hop tubes.
Yeah, you have the dry hop tubes as
yeah,
well.
drill a hole in the top and put that.
I think with those you
Put your
always
pickup
end
tube.
up with you still get some sort of like level of hop dust and sediment passing through them anyway. So you'd maybe want to put a filter between the transfer lines as well, one of the bouncers or something maybe.
Johan, the wonderful Dutch guy that we have who listened to us, has said it's always weird laying in bed with the missus listening to 4 guys. What is wrong with me? Absolutely nothing.
Nothing, mate.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Well,
yeah,
we're a special bunch of guys.
We won't judge, mate. You know, you Dutch guys,
man.
you do whatever you want.
Rich
This
Brooke
is my
just
partner,
said,
and also my lover.
Yeah, he's just lowered the level there a bit. Thanks for that. What's that, Mr. Brooks?
Things, isn't it? I think the bottom line here is you've got to do whatever you feel is right, and if you're getting good results from it, then don't fucking worry about what anyone else is doing. I think that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, I also think there's a little bit of hysteria over like dry hopping and oxidation thing. I think, you know, as long as you're not like opening it and just, you know, like splashing around with a fucking mash paddle and stuff like that, you know, I don't think dry hopping is the point where you're going to really suffer that much in terms of potential oxidation or introduction of oxygen into the beer. I think what we're going to talk about next is probably the point where most of the badly oxidized beers kind of occur, which is during the sort of transfer process between the FV and into, you know, your basically kegs or bottles, or and also when you're going onwards from that, bottling off of kegs and stuff to send it out to people and whatever.
So really, like we're talking about packaging here, right? Beer packaging. Yeah. So whether that be into keg, into bottle, into whatever, how do you reduce? And as I said earlier, it's like the invisible enemy, and more often than not, the biggest risk, as you say, Tricky, is it at this point, it's the racking off of beer. And just to make another really key point, which I think Chris has made maybe 16 or 17 times in the podcast so far, is do not rack to secondary fermentation. Just don't do it. There's no need.
Unless you're doing an open fermentation, and then definitely do it.
Yeah. It's one of those old brewing myths that you had to sort of do it, and all it's going to do is add oxygen to your beer.
Yeah, it was for clarifying the beer.
It's the highest
With
risk point of adding oxygen to your beer, isn't it? Transferring it, moving it. If you're moving a beer, there's risk that you're going to add oxygen.
No,
Do you guys agree?
Oh, I totally and utterly agree. The number of beers that I've had from breweries that have been utterly fucked, and then I've gone to the brewery and had their beer, and it's been absolutely perfectly fine. You know, I could probably count them on all fingers and all toes.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations. Beer doesn't travel well, and it doesn't travel well because of oxygen. This is why, as home brewers, when we produce beer and we do a closed transfer, we are getting as close to a perfect beer as you can get.
I think this is one of the reasons why
it ain't moving.
Like, you know, cask beer is not necessarily does not necessarily include the beers that are most susceptible to being oxidized. But I think the whole point about, like, you'll get your best cask beer from the pub that's next door to the brewery is because it's not been like fucking thrown in the back of a warm lorry and driven down the motorway and shook around, and then rolled down various ramps into a cellar and shook it about. And do you know what I mean? Between that beer going onto the tap and being served, and some of us now have the experience of putting fresh beers straight onto a beer engine and seeing, like, that's what a fresh beer through a fucking beer engine or hand
It's
will actually
interesting you
taste
bring
like.
up. It's interesting you bring up cask, because obviously they deliberately then introduce oxygen to the keg, or the cask. Sorry, should I say?
Yeah.
When they're pulling, and then oxygen does go back in. Now you can get a breather, I think, that you can hook up to CO2.
Yeah, aspirators or breathers.
Yeah. Which then increases the life of those casks. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why, for the quality, why it isn't more widely practiced. Because people would probably drink more cask ale off the back of it.
If you're not in a pub that's able to turn over those casks within, like, literally a day or two of them being opened, it's just mental that you wouldn't do it, because your stock is basically just going stale pretty much instantly from you opening it, and will only get worse. I've had, I mean, I'm sure we've all had loads of, sort of been in pubs where they're serving cask beer, and you just like, no, yeah, that beer's just stale and old and shit, and it's like, well, and that would be the solution. It would just solve that problem straight away. It would just stay fresh.
That's exactly what we've done as homebrewers. It's a case of we're venting it to a very, very low PSI.
Yeah.
And the beer keeps for weeks.
That's what makes me, like, laugh when you get the sort of camera fucking radicals who will sort of comment on videos like that and go, oh yeah, but it's not fucking real cask, is it? I was like, what? So you prefer the oxidized version of beer? Yeah.
Look, the bottom line is, let's not bash camera, okay?
Fuck camera. They like drinking oxidized beer. That's what they're used to drinking.
No, tricky.
Fuck those guys.
Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying don't say fuck camera.
What I'm slipping into the sweary phase, by the way. In case
there we go.
Let's not bash them too much, because they
fuck
are
those guys. Fuck those guys.
They are doing a good job with whatever it is that they're doing a good job with. I'm not quite sure what it is, but they're doing a good job with it. So I think when it comes to transferring, there's 4 very key points, okay? Purge everything with CO2. If you've got a Firmzilla, purge it with the gas that you get from your fermentation. You're going to capture some of the hop oils, the hop vapor that's in there. That's going to rack into your beer. That's going to be wonderful, especially if you're using kegs, okay? Be very, very careful. Rack quietly. Don't use a fucking auto siphon, okay? Don't fucking do it. They're shit. They're bad. They're fucking wrong.
They always leak.
Just don't do it, okay?
Don't use fuck a beer at some point.
Siphon, okay? Rack quietly. No splashing. Put your tube right at the bottom. Go very, very gently at the start, right? And then just keep that fucking tube submerged. Make sure the keg or whatever you're putting it into is purged with CO2. But the best option, we will keep banging this drum, is buy a Firmzilla. It's the cheapest, most cost-effective option, And just be careful, use close transfers, keep oxygen to a minimum, and it will have a dramatic effect on not only your beer's flavour, but the longevity of your beer and the way in which it works. Close transfers with a Firmzilla is the cheapest option for us home brewers. It really, really is.
Longevity is something that we've maybe not touched upon enough here, because I think earlier on in the chat, somebody asked about like, oh, is it that important for beers that aren't hazy, you know, pale ales or IPAs and all that sort of shit? And it's like, in the shorter term, probably not as important. You know, I think you can get away with a lot more with those sort of styles. But if you want like to extend the lifespan of your beer as much as possible and have it taste fresh, like 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line versus like
you
when
need
it
to use
first
a Linder
comes on
machine,
tap.
don't you?
Let's not go down that sticky rabbit hole. But anyway, in that case, yes, like longevity wise, all beers benefit from this because, as we said at the start, it's a staling agent. It sends your beer stale, and the whole cask argument as well that we've just sort of gone over. It's because once you introduce that air and that oxygen into the beer, it's basically just going off straight away. So, you know, keeping that to a minimum, whether it's a beer that's not particularly hoppy or is not going to necessarily exhibit the signs of oxidation as much as a NEPA or whatever, further down the line, it's still going to basically make it a less pleasant and fresh tasting beer over time if there's oxygen in there.
All beer
everything is going to
oxidation.
oxidize.
Everything.
All food, all drinks, everything suffers oxidation. It's the like a universal thing, isn't it?
All cooking is oxidation. You're oxidizing sugars or proteins or whatever. You're just oxidizing everything. That's basically that's probably the single most common chemical reaction in the world is oxidation. And the reality is,
well, oxygen is the most reactive element, isn't it? Or is that right? Or one of the most reactive elements? Wants to bond with?
No, it's pretty far from being one of the most reactive.
Okay, but it is very reactive.
It is one of the most common reactions.
Right.
Yeah. Johnny Apples has just raised a very, very good point. If you got two all-rounders, you could dry hop by transferring beer into the second fermenter that is purged and contains your dry hop.
Correct.
Thank you for the suggestion of my next video, Johnny.
I'm sure Martin.
Spoiler alert.
I'm sure Martin did that.
Coming soon on Dudes Brews.
Yeah.
Dry hopping via two
Martin
fermenters.
It's a niche market.
God, I'm knackered. Right.
To be fair, I don't think that's going to have the appeal of the mini keg, like reusing video.
Can we have the standard?
Can we have the standard keg suggestion?
Can we have the standard Millington rant now? Can we move on to oxygen scavenging additives?
Yeah, of course we can.
Just let me have my little rant, and then you guys can do what you do while I drink some more sour. Oxygen scavenging lids. Fuck the fucking fuck off. All right? They don't work. They don't scavenge enough oxygen.
I've not even heard of these. What are they?
Never.
Really? You know the crown caps with they've got like the white insert on the top. That's supposed to scavenge oxygen. Fuck off. They don't work.
Oh, I'll need to get some of those.
They don't work. Stewie's saying they work.
NEPA.
Oh, yeah. That's got it. Yeah. No, Stewie, they don't work. They don't fucking work at all. Okay? Because as soon as they're wet, they stop working. Okay? They just don't work.
They work. Yes.
What if you keep them dry?
Then they probably will work a little bit, but they're still not going to have enough reagent on there to perform the chemical reaction that they're going to need at the level that they're going to need to scavenge all the oxygen that you're going to put in there.
Just need a second. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, so oxygen scavenging additives. Ascorbic acid is the new kid on the block. I don't know anything about it, even though I'm a chemist. Well, biochemist.
But that is vitamin C, isn't it?
It is vitamin C, and I don't understand it. All I know is you shouldn't vape vitamin C because it makes your lungs turn hard. That's all I know.
Well, that's good advice.
It's antioxidant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Well,
you'll
yeah.
find it as a food additive, not just because it's vitamin C, but because it's an antioxidant.
Who
A
wrote
lot
these notes? Because it's on twice.
Well, I didn't write that bit, but
Why
anyway.
do we have vitamin C and ascorbic acid on that note?
I think I wrote it, and at the time I did say Chris, several times actually. I said, Chris,
Are these
is
not the same
vitamin C
thing? Yeah,
and ascorbic acid the same?
I'll
think
back
we
you up here,
actually
Owen. I do remember that.
I think we
Yeah, we
actually
started talking
spent
about
more
gravy.
time arguing about the spelling of ascorbic.
Anyway, yeah, and then it moved on
Yeah.
to gravy, and it was just lost to the mist
Oh,
of
it
time.
was,
To
Really,
be
wasn't
fair,
it?
I was
So-
having a bad day that day, and these three boys picked me up and put me back on my feet. So I'm not going to complain too much. But I will say sodium or potassium metabisulfite, not sulfate, or Camden tablets, that works. That is a really good oxygen scavenger. I could explain the chemical reaction to you, but it would confuse.
And you
most
need
people.
very, very little of it. It's literally
Like a teeny
less
tiny
than
amount.
a grain of rice amount of metabisulfite into.
If you're going to
Yeah.
measure it in teaspoons, you're using too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is it
So
not a
this
flavour?
is-
Does it not change the flavour?
It's like 0.3 of a gram's worth. Is that
I
sounds
heard
about right? Chris?
0.15.
Oh, okay, halve that then.
I'm
And
sure.
this is Camden tablets, right?
Yeah, same thing. But that's the thing. A Camden tablet is like way, way, way more than you need. That's
Stewie Prince wants to know what happens if he puts one tablet in. It's going to taste like rotten eggs. That's what's going to happen, Stewie. It's going to smell of sulfur and taste like shit. Don't do it.
And a
if you're
keg.
trying to bottle condition as well, it's going to kill your yeast or like stop the fermentation, so you wouldn't get secondary ferment as well. Because that's why they use it in wine, isn't it? They use it to stop fermentation as well
Yeah, sort of
for wine making.
Yeah, it's more common actually in winemaking, isn't it? Of the use of this sort of thing.
Yeah, they also use it to like sterilize the fruit and stuff, or sanitize the fruit before it goes in to be fermented. So
yeah, it's just to kill
kills
all the
wild yeast and stuff.
bugs and shit that are on the outside. Yeah,
I've got Camden tablets.
Anyway, we're nearly there. Let's get on to that next set of bullet points.
Seriously, we can get pissed if we finish this shit.
Bottling
So,
versus kegging, bottle
now,
conditioning. How much oxygen is scavenged by secondary fermentation? Chris, go.
Virtually fucking none. Because you're beyond the budding phase at this point. Okay? There may be a small amount of budding which is going to take up some of the oxygen, but the reality is virtually none.
This is one of those things, though, where you're on like Facebook groups and stuff, and it will come up as a common thing, like, "Oh yeah, but if you're bottle conditioning, it's going to eat all the oxygen, so it won't get oxidized."
No,
go and look at all of the bottle conditioned NEPAs on
all the purple
like,
NEPAs
Facebook groups that you've seen. Now, there are a few people who, a very few people who've managed to do it, and they must just be like so careful with all of their sort of processes, especially in terms of transfer and getting into the bottle and everything. But the vast majority of people attempting to do bottle conditioned NEPAs is basically it's a fucking write-off. It's turned purple, tastes like shit. Don't do it ever again. And pretty much that conversation ends in buy a keg and some gas. And
oh, that was impressive, Owen. Do that again. Do that again. That was a complete whiteout.
No, he's just dying now.
Smooth.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah. Now, you do have another option on this one, okay? There's no... Sorry, to finish off the first point, bottle conditioning, there's very little growth phase, very little anaerobic fermentation, very little aerobic... very little aerobic respiration, and very little aerobic reproduction. So that's why the oxygen isn't scavenged in a good way. Plus, by the time you've put it in there, added the sugar, the yeast have gone through the growth phase, the oxidation of the compounds in question is going to have already happened. So unless you've got a reducing agent in there, you're not really going to notice much of a difference. But to be fair, the reduction or the reducing phase is probably going to be not reducing the things that have been oxidized. It's going to reduce the things that are ready to be reduced. So, yeah, it's not going to work. The second one, Timmy methods. We need to talk about Timmy.
This is where we come to the outlier, that spot on the data that's like, hang on a minute, how the fuck does this work?
Yeah, everybody just ignores the outlier, but the outlier contains important data.
Hold on. Timmy, new info. Timmy uses vitamin C in his latest brews.
Well, he started using it, but he definitely didn't do it beforehand. For all the beers that we've doing it for years. Were good.
So the backstory on this one, right?
Why now?
For the benefit of our listeners who don't know Timmy Jenkins,
Pablo.
should we say infamous?
He's also the strongest man on the entirety of the known world, judging by his bottle closing.
You will, if you've followed our podcasts, I think when we did the NEPA podcast, we were drinking Timmy's beers. He has specialized in the New England IPA and frankly has nailed it. But interestingly, and the reason we're bringing this up is one, he doesn't do closed transfers. He transfers from, as far as I understand it, a tap.
Yep, a spigot.
A spigot into a keg. And he also tends to, once he's kegged a beer and it's carved, he tends to bottle half the keg, primarily for beer mails, because he's a very generous guy and does a lot of beer mailing.
Prolific.
But he also bottles with a party tap. But whenever you open a Timmy NEPA, it's like there's never any oxidation. It is on point. So there's some interesting things, as Chris said, in the outlier of the data there to suggest that, you know, let's put a microscope on Timmy's methods.
I think the reality is Timmy employs a number of techniques, because when he transfers into the keg, he's purging the keg with CO2 at the same time.
That's true.
He always has the gas post connected, the gas line connected, and he's always pushing CO2 into that keg, which is number one. If you've got a keg full of CO2 and you've got like positive pressure coming from within the keg, it is going to reduce the amount of oxygen you're going to get in there hugely. Secondly, when he bottles, and I've heard him talk about this, he will literally fill right to the top with positive pressure to push the gas out, but always leaves the foam and caps over the foam. And now we were talking about this on Thursday, and essentially
we had a discussion about this, didn't we?
It wasn't just there's another point.
Maltodextrin.
Maltodextrin,
yeah, but the chemistry behind that's rather complicated. I don't want to confuse people with that.
Okay, well, anyway, let's just say there's potentially a benefit to maltodextrin as well, which he uses in a large quantity.
I need to do more research into that, but yeah.
But the other point about the foam is actually, I think, the one that is probably most pertinent to this, because it's like you can do everything that we've said up to this point and then still fuck your beer completely with oxidation. If you're bottling a beer off, again, we're kind of mainly talking about bottling a beer off of a keg here. But if you are putting it in with some sort of contraption like a carbonation cap or a beer gun or whatever, where you pull the thing out of the beer at the end, you've purged the bottle, you've squirted it in under counter pressure, blah, 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 blah. You've done all that good stuff. And then you finish putting the beer in the bottle, take it out. The displacement from the tube or the wand or whatever that's in the beer comes out. What happens next? Air goes in its place, put the cap on, send it through the mail, get shook around by Royal Mail or whoever else you're sending it through for a few days or in the warm back of a van, which accelerates the oxidation process anyway. And then it turns up at, what was a fantastic beer 3 days ago is now fucking brown soup that tastes like jam and cardboard. And I think this is probably the bit that a lot of people are missing, is like that point there where you are letting the air back into the bottle and then sealing it on top, you've basically just created literally an oxidation chamber for the beer here. So Timmy, coming back to Timmy's method, if you are capping on top of foam, what's in that foam? CO2. No oxygen. You are displacing the air and the oxygen out the bottle. And processes like using an eye tap or just literally a party tap where you're capping on top of foam is maybe better than a carbonation cap or whatever, where you think that you're you're purging the bottle and the rest of it. I don't think purging the bottle is that important if you then just put air back into it and seal it up afterwards.
Yeah,
I think like
it's
the
still
purging
important.
the bottle thing.
I think it's still important because
don't get me wrong.
If
If you don't purge it and then you like splash the beer in like from the beginning, then you're going to oxidize it before you even get to the point of putting the cap on. But what I'm saying is like maybe some people are putting too much emphasis on getting the oxygen out of the bottle initially, and they're not worrying about what's happening when you actually stop and put the lid on, and leaving that nice little bit of headspace for because it's like it's a convention that you have to have for certain competitions. It's a convention that you have to have a certain amount of headspace in the bottle, otherwise it gets judged negatively. Like literally, some of the older like beer competitions, they will mark you down.
It's a fucking ballet competition, boys.
Yeah.
Just fuck brewing competitions off. All brewing judges are wankers.
No, but
you hear what I'm saying anyway. Like that's potentially oxygen in the bottle that you're introducing. So
guys, do not move on to the next point until I'm back, okay?
Yeah, but I'm just gonna. Tricky, you raised a really good point there. In the fact that you challenged the fact that most of the time the idea of filling up a bottle is always that you fill up from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what you just challenged. You actually said maybe actually that's not the right way to do it. And, I've used the old sort of counter pressure fillers, the ones that if you screw onto a PET bottle, I had a tube on that to sort of fill up from the bottom. I think in reality, you're probably sort of facing off two arguments there, right? One is not splashing the beer into the bottle, but in reality, if the bottle is purged of CO2, then it shouldn't really make too much difference, right?
Yeah.
Versus the pulling out of the tube that you've used to fill up from the bottom, and there being a counter pressure vacuum sucking oxygen in as you take that off. And in reality, that's a very interesting argument. That is basically saying we may have really misthought the whole concept of not beer engines.
Beer engines in the brain.
Beer guns.
Yeah, beer guns and counter pressure fillers and all that sort of stuff. The thing is, they all work on the same concept. It's like this dip tube that goes into the bottle to the bottom, and then you pull it out. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if your beer isn't like sort of lively enough that it's foamed up to the top after you pull that out, you inevitably are drawing air back in. And I think Martin's just commented on the chat that he will squeeze the space out. If it's a PET bottle, literally just to squeeze the foam up to the top of the bottom. That's one of the methods that I've used with the carbonation cap, is because I know that, like, okay, that air that's just gone back in is not what I want. So I'm either going to squeeze up to the top, or sometimes I'll just try and sort of fill it quite aggressively so that it will foam up when I pull the carbonation cap off, and then you are capping on top of foam anyway. So but I think I think the point, like you said, the point is that a lot of these methods, it's like unless you're purging that sort of headspace out of the bottle at the end, you're actually just undoing all of the good work that you've done up to that point, because you're leaving a nice cavity full of air and oxygen to fuck the beer up when it's in transit, pretty much.
Yeah, it's an interesting point when you observe the sort of canning lines on commercial breweries.
Yeah,
they are that generally there's some fingers heading into the can. I don't think, as far as I understand, they purge the cans of oxygen.
I think they do.
I could be wrong. Maybe they do.
I think they do.
So they're filling from the bottom, but then in reality, they're probably pulling the dispension spouts from the beer as the beer is still
Yeah, I
filling
think
out.
they're going like literally
Yeah.
to the last point.
So
until
beer's
it
coming
comes
out as that sort of
Yeah.
comes out to prevent
Definitely
that sort of
foam.
that vacuum. And also, I understand they're sort of firing like a dot of sort of CO2 or whatever, like into the beer or something that's.
You said it was liquid nitrogen? Or
Yeah,
nitrogen
kind
in
of.
description. But there is... Yeah, I mean, that would work. There is a new product which we may or may not, they haven't actually got back to me just yet. We may be able to have a little giveaway on this podcast. I'm going to do a little bit when it comes to the audio recording at the start of the podcast, which kind of explains everything. But the reality is we may be able to give away an iTap. And the iTap is a new and fantastic bit of kit when it comes to bottling. It is massively improved over every other counter pressure filling option that there is. And I think that's why 3 of us who are on this podcast at the moment have one, and the 4th wants one. So essentially, Boel.
Can I win it?
No, you can't. Boel, who make the iTap, I've been in contact with them, basically trying to get this, which is my super long shank, so it'll fit in my kegerator. We're trying to get them to, I was trying to sort of tap them up and see whether or not there was any chance of a giveaway, because me and Tricky have always said, ever since we started doing this podcast, and I think Andy and Owen will agree with me when I say this, we won't promote products or breweries on this podcast that we don't personally have experience of either using or drinking their beer of or using their kit of, and it isn't excellent.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I'm not going to be some shill, like some people we could mention, who will take money from companies and promote a product which is wank. Okay? Now, Boel, specifically with the iTap, now I paid money for mine because I wanted one, because I do a lot of bottling, not necessarily to send out on B-mails, because we all know how shit I am at doing that, but for one specific person who is a celiac, who wants gluten-free beer, I'm happy to make it for her. She's happy to pay for the ingredients. I just supply the expertise. And as far as I'm concerned, that's wonderful. But I have reduced the level of oxidation within those beers that I send to her by using the iTap massively. And you can tell there is a huge difference. Okay. Now, the iTap, what it does is, and Owen will explain because he said it rains beer down the side of the bottle.
It does. It doesn't use a spout to fill from the bottom. It fills from the sides all the way round the side to the bottom. So it doesn't drip. It doesn't spurt. It kind of imagine like an infinity pool.
Oh, an infinity pool. Exactly, yes.
You know, if you've had the pleasure, it's that sort of.
And if you haven't, you need to.
Yeah, you should. Everyone needs to experience that.
I experienced an infinity pool in Dubai. It was fantastic.
And it just sort of pours around the side and fills from the bottom. It's beautiful. It literally is beautiful. When I used my iTap for the first... Excuse me. Hey!
Somebody's
He's
hammered!
got the hiccups.
10% of the
Yeah. When I used it for the first time this week.
Coffee triple.
But
Oh man,
It was a
I
pleasure.
go
But
spit
I'm
out,
gonna-
Aaron. You
I'm
can get
gonna-
there.
I'm gonna-
this is so professional. I mean, Boel are gonna love this.
Right.
I think what he's saying is, when it flows down the side, it is beautiful, and the way in which it works, it is stunning.
When it flows down the side, it is
Flows,
beautiful. Yeah.
flows. It is beautiful. It is a wonderful thing.
Oh,
And the
man.
bottom line is, the way in which it fills the bottles is very conducive to minimal oxygen getting into your beer. You purge the bottles before you fill them, so it's full of CO2 anyway. But the reality is, the way in which the beer enters the bottle, it's very well thought out. There's nothing sticking down the middle. There's no what's the correct word? There's no displacement to worry about when you take it out. And when you disconnect, there's foam right up to the lid. In actual fact, based upon the design of the seal, and I don't know if this was deliberate or not, but Boel, you have fucking nailed it. There is a dome on top of the foam. So it's actually protruding beyond the edge of the bottle. So when you cap it, you're capping onto literally straight onto foam. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. The way in which it works is great. And we always said that we wouldn't take any sponsorship for this show, okay? And we're not taking sponsorship.
I never said
technically.
that. Send me sponsorship. I'll take
I
all the
know.
money.
We
I'm
did.
a corporate whore.
Well, we know you are. But the reality is, we would not take
That's why my
sponsorship from
tap is
just
coming for free, bitches.
seriously, Tricky, you know that this is going out to Boel, right? You know they're going to listen to this. The point is,
Yeah, I know it's in the post already. So.
we are not going. Yeah, but you may interfere. Oh, fucking hell! You lack professionalism, you bearded cockwomble. The way in which the product has been designed and the way in which it works is fucking wonderful, and it does really reduce the amount of oxidation that can occur within the bottling process off of the ITAP. It's also fucking fast, dead easy to set up.
Yeah,
And if you contact Boel, they will even send you an appropriate shank in order to make it fit your kegerator, because that's what they've sent me. So the customer service is really good. I will only promote, and ignore Tricky because he's a corporate whore and he'd take it up the arse from fucking Grainfather if he offered him one. If a product is good, and
I could be the new David Heath.
Well, you already are. If a product is good and it works and it does the job
I'm
appropriately,
not at that level yet, Jesus.
And it's good, I will promote it. All right, these other three, I mean, they take it in the rear for a beer. Me, I am straight down the line, and I will not promote something that's shit. So obviously the ITAP's fucking fantastic. Now, can I do the little competition thing?
Yeah.
Because assuming that Boel actually send us or give me the thumbs up for this, because I've been waiting for somebody to reply for a couple of days. They're in Russia, cut them some slack. On the website, there is now an option to sign up for the newsletter. Okay? We'll let you know when there's an episode coming, when there's an episode released. We'll let you know what we're doing. We'll let you know about the merch. The bottom line is, if you sign up to that newsletter, then basically we will put you into a draw to win the ITAP. Now, it's a crown cap ITAP. It's not a pet bottle ITAP, but you can buy the replacement bit. If you want to be involved in that, go and enter your email address and your name on the hopedition.uk website, and we will put you into the draw for the Boel ITAP with crown cap, assuming Boel tell us that we can still have it. How about that? The first ever giveaway from the Hop Edition, aside from Tricky's pubic thatch, which he sold for comic relief.
And not to mention, hit up the Hop Edition YouTube page, hit subscribe
and like
and leave a comment on this very video.
Disjointed video. inebriated, disjointed video. Let us know what you think, guys, because we need your feedback. We want to know where to go from here. And as much as we love sitting down and talking shit for 3 hours and getting utterly battered, hearing Owen with the dulcet tones of Marvin Gaye played over the top and the hiccups, and I don't know what he's drinking right now, but that could be quite bad. It's one of those things. We need your feedback. We want to know where to go from here. And let's just get this going. Sign up for the newsletter. Click subscribe. Click like. Let's get some likes on this video. And let's see where we can take this podcast from here.
Nice. That was anti-phrase, by the way.
Enjoy being blind. That's all I've got to say. So, yeah.
Cool.
I think at that point, we have covered everything that we want to cover about oxygen. Who would have thought me, the bloke who was the most pissed an hour ago, is the most sober in doing this final bit? Tricky looks like he's about to fall asleep. Andy has been asleep. And Owen is so drunk he's got hiccups.
It was temporary.
Everyone's fine. We're all fine, Chris. What are you talking about? I'm fine. They're
I
fine.
don't know what you're talking about. I'm sober as a judge, mate.
I'll have you know I'm not sober, and neither is my cat.
All right. I guess we're saying goodbye
No. If anybody can name the
still got
film,
more to drone on about.
Yeah.
if anybody can name the film
carry on,
that
Chris.
quote I've just done comes from, I will personally send you a beer mail.
What was the quote?
I'll have you know I'm not sober, and neither is my cat.
Good.
No. All right.
Let's say
Bye then.
night, everyone.
Bye, guys. Episode 26 is in the bag. We're out. Bye.
Adios.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Wow.
Boomsies.
That went downhill fucking quick. Tricky and his inability to shut his mouth.
Episode
This is fashion.
26.
Yeah, episode 26. Just stick it up on the Gmail and on the Google Drive, and I'll sort it.
I'm on it. Like
Yeah.
Sonic.
Tricky, you're right, mate.
What?
What's
Yeah.
with the Brewmaster t-shirt?
It's just a t-shirt.
Where'd you get it from?
I think the missus bought it for me for Christmas or something.
Cool.
She obviously likes the beers.
She likes your beers.
Slightly overconfident.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel slightly self-conscious wearing it, especially on a podcast. But
Oh, you'll be claiming that you worked in commercial breweries pretty soon, won't you?
well, I brewed my first beer at age 3 under the tutelage of my brewmaster father, and I've never mentioned this before, but I did actually work commercially in a brewery for 10 years. I won't reveal the name of that though, because my privacy is very important to me. So you'll just have to take my word for it.
Jeez.
How is your arm hair going, Tricky?
Pretty good. It's coming along well.
Is
I've
it?
been adding some nutrients to it to try and increase the thatch level.
Because you're gonna have to really work that to get up there.
Yeah, I know. It's not. It's almost like it's nowhere near the sort of orangutan level that I need to achieve to really.
Exactly. Also, I think you need to be a little bit more boring.
I don't know.
I
He's
think I need
getting there.
to go a little bit more monotone.
He's getting there.
I'm working on it. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for that.
I'm only joking.
We are still live on YouTube, by the way.
Yeah, we know that. This is
we've
the
not
band.
mentioned anyone
This
by
is the band
name, have
section.
we? I mean, like, what are we talking about here? What are you talking about, Owen?
I know.
Who are you talking about, Owen?
I was just talking
He's
about.
talking about David fucking Heath. That's who he's talking about. I don't give a shit.
Fucking Daft Cats straight out with it.
Yeah. To be fair, Stewie, you're right. We are all fairly pissed. Well, I am. I just decided to hold it together for 20 minutes.
Have we David Heath jokes?
Dropping the David Heath jokes.
Maybe.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know. Right, guys, I'm going to drop a link to the post-show party, which is going to happen. Well, it's already happening, let's face it. I'm gonna post it
Facebook.
into.
Oh, right. Can I just tell people before you join, right? We're not fucking talking about politics for the next hour. All right? We're not doing that.
When did we do that?
It
When did we
happens
do that?
every freaking time. We end up talking about Brexit or fucking COVID or something really dull, and I end up just playing poker and not listening to any of
The
these.
topic
Yeah,
of conversation is going to be tits and moist fannies. All
You're
right?
here to drink beer and chat about beer, not fucking current affairs.
There you go. I've been told.
You've been told.
Okay, that.
Right. J-Fuck, are you going to join us? Let me know in the chat. Are you going to join us? Because if you are, I'll post the link and then I will say the password and you'll have to listen.
Hop Edition. Hop Edition, I love you. You're one of my favorites. You're in my podcast favorites.
Hope it is you're on it.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
So you're going to kill that YouTube stream at any point?
No.
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 Just give it a minute.
Just leave me singing. Andrew, I love you.
Oh, you carry on then, Owen. You carry on.
I get no kick from champagne. Right, here we go. Hang on just a second. No, wrong fucking doofer. Right. Okay, I'm going to kill the YouTube stream. So if you guys want to join, that is the link. The password is Twatty Bollocks. Was it Twatty Bollocks or Twatty Cunt? No, it was Twatty Cunt, wasn't it? Password is Twatty Cunt. TWATTYCUNT, all one word. Feel free to join us. We'll be here for probably in the next 30 to 35 minutes. No politics. Owen's orders. Off you go.
Tits.
I'm fucking hoofing you if you talk about politics.